Before we get going, we'll start with the monthly announcement. So can I remind everybody that this meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording will be archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid background noise when others are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, please raise your hand if you have your camera on or use the raise hand function. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of our recording. The use of the chat function should be reserved for any technical issues to alert myself or the Democratic Service Officer. Thank you. If we can start with agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence. Have you had any through, Mark?
I've not had anything through formally, Chair, but I do believe there might be one or two members not on the call, so I don't know if there are any apologies to share at this time.
I've had apologies from Councillor Hamilton, and I believe Councillor Lovelock-Edwards may not be able to join us as well. But nothing else has come through to me.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. I think item number 2 then are declarations of interest. I'm not sure if we've had any of those, Mark.
I believe Councillor Goodjohn might want to make a declaration now, Chair.
Marvellous, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare personal and prejudicial interest in item 3, procurement strategy, as I am a Cardiff and Vale College student and would probably benefit from skills academies and training allowance. Thank you. I would like to speak as a member of the public on this item, but I will leave the meeting afterwards.
Okay, that's great. So if we can then move on to agenda item 3, which is our first reference from Cabinet. This is the procurement policy and strategy. It was heard at Cabinet on the 27th of February 2023. Over to Matt Bomer. Thank you.
Evening, everyone. I think this is a relatively ambitious new procurement policy and strategy, and it's certainly the case that a huge amount has changed since we published the last one back in 2018. I'm happy to present it in that it's been a really good collaborative piece of work across the organisation. So I've had input from colleagues in our regeneration teams, HR, from our own property team, and education and skills, amongst others. So a really good collaborative piece of work that we kicked off at the start of last summer. There's been a need to update it for a number of reasons. So firstly, it's updated to align with our latest corporate plan and also policy initiatives from Welsh Government, and there've been a number of those in the procurement space over the last few years. Also taking the opportunity to streamline elements of it. So the policy section is streamlined and hopefully a bit punchier around our policy objectives, and we've given extra prominence to Project Zero and support for SMEs and local businesses in that section as well. We've done, as a council, a lot of work, excellent work in driving social value from the 21st Century Schools, the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, but I want to build on this across the whole council. So initially we're going to adopt the Welsh Government framework, but those who have been through the document in some detail will know that it's quite an impenetrable set of targets, outputs and measures, and I do want to streamline that. And this a piece of work that complements this that also went to Cabinet last time, and that's our shared service arrangement with Cardiff. They've done a fair amount of work in the social value space, and we can certainly use that collaboration to help streamline and focus our attention on social value. There is an initial push for greater weight to be attached to social value too, and you'll see from the recommendations that we're looking to update contract procedures to have a 10% component for social value as a minimum. So there'll be a further report going to council at some point. We also want to stretch our suppliers to help meet our corporate objectives. So a key element of the strategy is that we've set minimum expected and preferred standards, and also sought to differentiate between small and large companies. So we'll be expecting companies to comply or tender in line with our expected, but we set minimum, and there's preferred that are a bit of a stretch as well. We have a duty to publish a modern slavery statement on an annual basis. So we've taken the opportunity to publish that alongside the strategy, and that will shortly go on the council's website. I'm also conscious that it's a lengthy document, and from some conversations that we've had in this committee previously, I've been spurred on to actually write an executive summary as well. So there's a shorter version of the document available as well. And finally, the last thing I want to mention, I've taken the opportunity to run it past a cross section of our existing suppliers. So we wrote out to 25 of those, and we've had responses back from 18, and they've given us some useful pointers, certainly around raising awareness, and at the moment there's some opportunities to publish the policy and strategy on sale to Wales and give it a bit more prominence on the council's website as well. So that's all I wanted to say in introduction, so happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Ewan, good John, you wanted to speak as a member of the public, or are you speaking?
Yes, just to speak as a member of the public, and then afterwards I will leave the meeting as due to my interest. But I hope the committee will consider a few points on this document, simply as this is an extremely important document and one of the most important documents we'll look at in a very long time, particularly regarding our attempts to become a net zero organisation by 2030. This document is absolutely crucial to this role. I think the policy makes some very good steps. However, I hope the committee will consider a few of these points, just to consider amendments and to clarify points. I would like to particularly look at 5.2, which regards labour and employment. Which is, I would like the committee to consider specifying what is excessive working hours. Is that 40 hours or is that 48 hours? Specify that. I would like the committee to consider adding to the expected section that companies pay the real living wage, as we do, and hope that the majority of our procurement comes from companies that do so, and adding to preferred that workplaces are actively unionized instead of just being allowed to unionize if need be. And I would also like to draw the attention to table 7.4, particularly to the minimum section, where I would appreciate some more commitment regarding large companies that we're procuring from, regarding reporting carbon emissions and commitment to net zero in Wales, and clarifying that the company is committed to net zero and not just committed to Wales becoming net zero overall. And also medium companies tracking their carbon emissions and having commitment to reducing emissions. And finally, contracts over £5 million to please clarify again that the company is committed to net zero themselves by 2030 instead of just committed to Wales becoming net zero by 2030. So just a few points for the committee to consider. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ewan. Matt, is there anything on that you'd like to come back on? I know there was quite a lot.
Yeah, certainly. Section 5.2, I think there's some useful comments there, and probably it's quite an omission that we probably haven't got the real living wage in there actually. So I'd like to take opportunity to update it for that. I'll have a look about the working hours reference as well, and obviously there was European legislation on that. Just check across what the regulations currently say, and we probably need to update for that, and I can have a chat with our HR colleagues around that. Unionisation, I'm a little bit less comfortable on, and I'll need to discuss that out with colleagues and take some advice on that. And then Councillor John, if you could drop me a line about the various or go back through the comments you raised in 7.4, and I'll have a look at taking those on board as well. I should have said, and it's in the cover report, but I did make reference to we've been awaiting a toolkit from WLGA through Welsh Government. That should have been published in the autumn, but it's imminent. So this is a section I will be looking to update, and we've put delegations in to update it in the near future. So that toolkit's on the way. But if you could just give me that wording, and it is quite subtle, isn't it? Just changing it to that they've got a general commitment, not just to the Welsh targets. And I think that wording probably appropriate that we do update it in that way. So I'm happy with those couple of comments. What was can you remind me what your third one was?
Again, just to clarify that the company in question is committed to net zero themselves by 2030 instead of net zero in Wales by 2030.
Yeah, I think I can take those comments on board, but it'd be handy if you could just put them in an email to me as well.
Yes, I'll put them in an email to you, and thank you very much, and I'll leave the meeting now.
Yeah, thank you for your comments.
Yeah, just to be clear, for clarity, Ewan was talking then as a member of the public, not as a councillor, because he'd declared his interest that he is a student at Cardiff Vale College. So that was okay. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Haynes, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. You have to bear with me a bit because I've got a few IT problems, so I'm having to do rusty devices. Right, so please bear with me. I'll just get the hand down first, if I think I have. All right, just a couple of things. I'll keep it as brief as I can. Thank you, Matt, for the report, and thank you, Chair, for letting me speak. 2.18, there's much is being made of shortage of staff in 2.18 and the fact that no forward plan can be done without an extra member of staff who's obviously short of. I, for the life of me, can't understand why the head of department can't develop the forward plan. And if it's important, I think the head of department should take it on board. Apart from that, general terms on the policy document, much was made about businesses and the wider Vale. I would like to see a statement saying that Vale and Glamorgan businesses would be treated with more preferential treatment wherever possible. And also I'd like to see more made of the fact that value for money is as important as just about everything else. Bearing in mind we have net zero commitments, but we also have an obligation to our taxpayers to keep costs down as low as possible. And I think that should be made more aware in this document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Councillor Carroll, I think you were next.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt, for the presentation. Matt, it's just a question, first of all, if you could answer this, because I have a few points to raise. When this document was being produced, what was the main consideration that was supposed to be at the heart of it?
I think at the heart of it was how much the world has changed since we had our last policy, and it's only 4 or 5 years ago. But if we just think to the extent to which carbon reduction has come to prominence, the document certainly needed strengthening round there. The ethical practices, the same. So I think just the world's moved on quite a bit since the 2018 document. So I think it just needed quite a bit of updating and uplifting, and certainly on some of those agendas, probably the old document wasn't ambitious enough. So that we have tried in this update to give a bit more of a stretch. And I would probably respond a little bit to Councillor Haynes's point at the same time as respond to yours as well. Yeah. There wasn't enough focus on what the actual policy was, because there was too much in there. So I have tried to slim it down, and whilst I talked specifically in the introduction about giving extra prominence to a couple of the elements of the policy, VFM, value for money, takes greater prominence because I've streamlined the rest of the policy objectives down. So it's just sharpening up the policy bit and acknowledging that the world's moved on a bit. I guess one of the point I would like to make, I do want to make it an organisational document that everybody supports and works towards, and for that reason have taken time in developing the policy and strategy, and as I said in the introduction, involved and engaged with as many people across the organisation as possible in drawing it together.
So VFM then is a consideration, but it doesn't. I just note that it wasn't the first thing that you said when I asked that question. And from a personal point of view, I think it's pretty much in agreement with Councillor Haynes on this. When it comes to providing services, in my point of view, value for money is the most important thing, because that doesn't just mean getting the cheapest price. It means getting good quality services for a decent price, because obviously that can lead to better longer term results. I mean, I use an example this morning. A resident tagged me in a post on Facebook. A pothole was recently refilled in my ward on Dock Dewey Road, and that pothole hadn't been filled particularly well, and they sort of said to me, well, they've done this, they're going to have to come back in a few weeks or a few months because the work hasn't been done to a high enough standard. And so my point really is, you read the document and there's lots in there on sort of ethical considerations, things like modern slavery, lots, and don't get me wrong, laudable aims, but I think that when it comes to procurement, the first thing that residents will want to see is that they're getting value for money, because ultimately they're paying for these services. And I think we have a council tax rise last week agreed of 4.9%. We're seeing cuts being made to other services, I think. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate there are cost pressures there, but I think that when that is the case, residents will expect that when you're providing services and you're putting contracts out to tender and all the rest of it, your prime focus is making every penny that the authority is spending go as far as it can. And personally, I would agree with Councillor Haynes on this. I really do think we need to make sure that we spell that out, because I think it's easy I'm not saying people are deliberately going out of their way not to achieve value for money. I don't think anybody would do that. But I think that it's important that every decision is made with that consideration in mind. So I think that if we could sort of beef that up and really push that would make this a better document.
Yeah, I think it is a difficult one, because in streamlining that policy section, I've taken it down to 8 policy objectives, and obviously kicking off with actually making sure that we meet our objectives as an organisation first off. Perhaps I'd probably accept having, of the 8, the securing value for money being the 8th one. Yeah. Albeit there are 4 components to it, so it does have some of your beefing up. I'd probably happily move it to 2nd or 3rd in the list, because it is an overarching one, before you get into some of the more specifics around being carbon neutral, improving fair value work, making procurement spend more accessible to local businesses and the like. So it is an overarching one, and it probably wouldn't be inappropriate to move it to perhaps 2nd in the list.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying, obviously net zero is a big target, and I mean, whenever we look at a report, obviously the risk factors come forward, and the fact that obviously it's going to cost us money, and we have to be prepared for it. So I'm certainly not saying take anything else out of the report necessarily. I mean, don't get me wrong, if I went through it line by line, there will be things that I would probably remove on a personal preference. But I'm just saying, rather than sort of remove anything or have it at the expense of anything else, I think it's really important that every single other principle is underpinned by that. And I think if we could have that at the heart of the document, I think it would improve it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Burnett.
It's okay, Chair. If Councillor Wood wants to go first, that's fine.
Oh,
I
yeah.
can answer him as well.
Thank you. Councillor Wood, sorry about that. Would you like to speak?
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
Yeah, I understand we're trying to match our net zero and our social commitments with taking this forward. And I'm a little curious. You say you've surveyed 18 suppliers, and we're talking. I was wondering how far any of our suppliers are along their plan to deliver the minimum or exceeding that, because what we do risk is that we risk excluding smaller local suppliers who may not have embarked on carbon control within their organisation at the expense of larger organisations who, particularly in construction, which I know a bit about, this is a big thing for larger companies, and smaller companies to embark upon taking these things forward, it's a big cost for them. So that's the first thing. I wonder if any of the suppliers have acknowledged how far along they are. And I noticed we say we make a commitment in the future for things. Well, if we're going to hit this by 2030, we're in 2023. So there are a few statements in there which say in the future we would like them to aim towards this. I think it might be better to put a slightly hard and fast time on it, 2 years, 18. I know some of them have got a time frame on them, but there are others that aren't. And then my third thing on sell to Wales necessarily, which obviously contains an awful lot of public procurement. How many other councils, obviously everybody's attempting to do this, are we in line with, do we know if we're in line with a lot of other councils in what we're asking of people? Because we do run the risk that some suppliers will say, some existing suppliers will say, well, we'll just not supply the Vale of Glamorgan anymore because we can supply other councils in the area and focus on them. And then we might end up losing suppliers who are people who've supplied the Vale for quite a long time.
Right, quite a few comments there to
Sorry.
Pick up, if I can pick them all up. I guess the 25 suppliers we went to, 18 responded, and they were from a cross section of our services. So there were a number from property, ICT, education, and environment and housing. Okay. I think my only disappointment was we did go out and approach 5 companies in the social services area, and they were the ones who typically hadn't responded, and that's a little bit disappointing. But in general, and I can't quote you from all of those responses in detail, but there was a clear commitment from them all towards carbon zero. Okay. And there certainly was a really good understanding of issues like social value, and how they could not just deliver the contract, but deliver to the wider social benefits of the county in doing so. So that's on the general response. I haven't obviously I've been working with Cardiff over recent months in developing the shared service arrangement. So I've been sharing our policy with them, and generally it does align. So at least there's one neighbour it aligns with, but I haven't done the more wide consultation and looking at, say, across all of Wales about what procurement strategies look like. I guess some of the reason for wanting to work with the suppliers was testing out the minimum expected and preferred, and making sure that we weren't going a step too far and limiting opportunities and limiting the number of tenders we were going to have. So that was testing the water a bit in that approach. And I certainly do recognise that it's certainly in areas like carbon zero, it is going to be more of a challenge for smaller local firms to meet standards than the larger nationals and multinationals, and that's the reason for that particular section having the various levels of differentiation in it that it does.
Yeah, it's just from my experience, I've actually completed quite a few tenders on Sell to Wales, and everybody looks for the ones that are, what to say, if you're a small, medium-sized business, you shy away from anything that is going to take an onerous amount of time for you to complete or embark upon. If you're a small, medium-sized business of 10 to 15 people, and it's something that you haven't embarked upon, then all of a sudden you think, oh, crumbs alive, there's 6 months' work here for me to be able to tender for this. That's all I would like to try to avoid, is that we try to find a way that smaller local businesses can definitely, or small, medium-sized local businesses aren't shied away from, but then we also have to carry forward the net zero requirement. So, you know, it's a difficult balance to achieve. I'm not saying it's easy, it's a difficult one.
I did spend quite a lot of time and a couple of sessions with our regen team, and actually having a look at that commitment that we make to small local suppliers, and looking at how as a council we can better support people in being able to tender for our services. So that was a section we did spend a lot of time on, and making sure that smaller companies do have sufficient support from us to be able to access our contracts.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. This, I think, as Matt said at the start, this is a hugely ambitious piece of work, but it is such an exciting piece of work in the potential for a massive impact on our communities and the economic impact for our communities. If I just remind you of some of the outcomes that we had from Sustainable Communities for Learning, just in just over 2 years, that programme created 1,200 new jobs. There were more jobs than 1,200, but 1,200 new entrant jobs, 88 apprenticeships, over 50 million. I think it was either 56 or 59 million re-injected back into Wales, spent within Wales. And from a net zero perspective, 99% of waste was recycled. And that's in a recent cabinet report on community benefits, and that is all monitored very, very carefully. When we delivered that, we wanted to spread that good practice right across the council, and we've been working to it. So there's been the foundation economy work that we've done with SMEs in the Vale. We've held numerous Meet the Buyer events where we've talked to them about upskilling for zero carbon construction techniques, etc. We've talked to lots of different people. Today I was actually talking procurement with the WLGA Rural Forum, as I'm a rural spokesperson. And again, that was really important in terms of how we procure all sorts of things, and and how it will support our rural businesses. I think Councillor Carroll possibly confused value for money with performance data. If somebody's not doing a job properly, then that should be monitored. But what I would say is to have a word with our highways team, because quite often when it's an emergency pothole repair, if it's wet or cold when you do it, they just do a temporary repair, and that does break down, and it means going back, but rather than leave the hole as it is. But have a chat to the highways team, and they'll explain the difference, and they'll also explain their performance monitoring there. Years ago, I actually worked providing support to small businesses on employment law, etc. And I think some of the work that our economic development and regen team are doing is actually upskilling businesses to be able to enter into procurement with us. I think if we just go for and value for money is often another word for go to bottom level costs. That is where we would find the local economy being cut out of the mix. And I quoted this afternoon when I was talking to others, a situation where there was a large-scale milk contract tendered for Wales, and the way in which that contract was tendered virtually put small dairies out of business because of their subcontracting network. And these are things we have to be very, very mindful of. This policy is all about sharing the outcomes of the money that this council spends right across the Vale, and delivering outcomes for people, helping businesses to grow, helping businesses to upskill, and making sure that also that we get good quality local, whether it be services or goods, and being mindful of our carbon footprint at the same time. I know that that Matt's talked about taking some of the things that Ewan mentioned on board. I would support that, but I think that one thing that I would do, as I said, having worked on employment practice and employment law, is look at the impact on the micro and small businesses, where we want them to support unionisation, but in terms of the relationship with unions, I'd probably want to talk to unions as well as how that might work. But no, it's really good policy, and thank you, Matt, for all your work on this. Something we've wanted to do for so long, and to see it actually happening is hugely rewarding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. If I could say a few things, I know as chair, it's not always the done thing. It's to facilitate conversation and debate, and it's been a good one. I think in answer to some of the questions that other people have raised, the standards, and that's a very interesting thing, to introduce the standards into the procurement strategy that you're expecting from suppliers. But in terms of the carbon net zero objectives, and also the social value measurement, this isn't something unusual that the Vale of Glam are doing. This is happening in other local authorities too. So just to assure Councillor Wood, so the sort of things I would expect to see in a standard procurement strategy, quite a lot of it is covered. The vision, that's kind of like a normal theme, and you would expect that to see what our goals and understanding the approach and the identity and the scope of the remit. You'd expect that in your vision. I know we've talked about the vision from the Welsh Government's perspective, but I don't know whether we could perhaps have a little bit more in there about our vision. Performance metrics. Now, this is quite an important one, because I think the old saying is, you can't manage what you don't measure. We have the total amount of spend, which I think of an annual basis was 178 million, but you would expect in general to see a breakdown of that spend. So the directorate, at the very least, and also I think you would expect to see an idea of what you're spending that money on. And I do understand opposition, that you have devolved procurement to the directorates, but it's a general expectation. And going forward, I know this is ambitious, but it would probably be helpful to start trying to collate that data and putting it in the procurement strategy. The procurement capabilities, and I think we've already suggested in here that that's limited, and that is a resource issue. You've got two members of staff and a vacant post, haven't you? And their role has been, which you have been very honest in the executive summary, compliance with regulations. And this takes me to something which I worry because it's quite absent, and that is the governance of this. And especially when you have a devolved setup, because if there aren't checks and balances on their work, you really can't see if they are compliant with regulations, and that is something that worries me a little bit. I'd like to see that so that we know And you've included all of the recent procurement notices, the WPN notices from Welsh Government, which is great. And one of the most recent ones is about transparency and making sure that whenever we have anything that we procure, even direct awards now and waivers, that's an award notice is put onto Sell to Wales. Do we know that that's happening? Do we have the governance in place to make sure that it is? I'd like to see something on those lines in there. You've covered the stakeholder engagement, and I think that's great to have that consultation with the suppliers. Really, really good. And then I think the seventh thing that really I think you probably need, because in this there's an awful lot of these are things that we want to do. We want to work on our contract register. We want to use Atomis. We want to do these things. We're going to introduce TOMS, and that's a big job. I know that's a big job. From my own authority, it's hard work to do that and identify all of the themes and measures that you're going to use. So you really, really should have a plan of action in there as well, I think, which is time bound. So you can break this strategy down into logical steps of deliverables. So where we're saying we're going to work on these things, that, well, when are we going to do it? How are we going to do it? And who's going to do it? I think that would really help. Because these are aspirations and it is ambitious. But I think, yeah, that's even more than the others. I'm so sorry, Matt. They're furiously writing away.
No, thank you for that. And they are actually fair comments, and it's making me think a little bit of horse before the cart, because some of what you're asking for and procurement policies I've worked on and other organisations, they are in there.
Yes.
I don't have that.
Yes.
So
yes.
one of the things, and this really does complement the work that we are doing in the shared service with Cardiff. So we do have the two procurement officers we had are really very capable, and sometimes I wonder how a vet in particular gets through everything she does. She's fantastic, but we haven't had specialist procurement officers. So in our collaboration with Cardiff, the structure they have will be around category management. So they will have teams who are specialising in construction, in social care, etc. And in time, what I would like to do, and it may be it's in the next iteration of this policy, that almost more importantly than breaking down spend by directorate is actually breaking it down by category and understanding as an organisation where we're actually spending our money. So if I'd had that data, I would have liked to put it in, but I don't have it. But we will have it. And I'm working with Cardiff and Steve Robinson, their head of service, about what our development plan is and what we're going to try and how we're going to try and move this forward over the next year, 18 months for sure. And that would be our action plan that ordinarily would be in here as well. But I don't have that. I've got to work through where we need to go next. So there will be an action plan and a development plan. Ordinarily it would be in here, but it's going to have to sit outside for the moment. One of the things around governance, and the report does touch on a little bit, but perhaps doesn't go far enough. Once we have a more robust contract register and the forward plan that we'll be able to derive from that, then we can put a bit more challenge out to the organisation, and not only around delivering to our objectives, but actually making sure that we are driving value for money as well, around making sure that we're making the right sourcing decisions. So the plan is, once we have the forward plan together, that will go to the council's inside board on a quarterly basis. So we'll be looking at the procurement that's coming down the pipeline and actually making sure that we're putting enough challenge in and taking the right decisions. So that's the main piece of governance that's going to go in place. And certainly what on the TOMs, and that's that they are, as I said in the intro, that framework, the Welsh Government framework, is just far too big and unwieldy at the moment. So we need to streamline that. And I would expect with support of Steve from Cardiff that we'll do some workshops with the organisation over the next 6 to 9 months and actually focus down on how we can use the TOMs and a streamlined TOMs framework, perhaps with 25, 30 rather than the 80, to actually hone down where we want to drive that social value.
Yes.
So there's
30 sounds
your
perfectly, yeah.
comment, but there's a lot still to be done.
Yes. And I would probably suggest that this is, I mean, it is a living document anyway, isn't it? Procurement strategy. It shouldn't be set in ASPIC. It's not a 5-year thing. It needs to be reviewed on a regular basis. And in the next year, there is so much coming in with procurement reform, and it's going to be a very, very busy time. So let alone, your WPN notices, who knows how many you'll get in the next 12 months.
Yeah.
So you're going to need to keep updating it even on that, and your program of activity, which, as you say, is exciting and ambitious. So yeah, lots and lots to do. I can see Councillor Haynes has his hand up again.
Yes, thank you for letting me come back in, Chair. Appreciate it. Matt, you've, as I mentioned when I spoke earlier, I mentioned the forward plan, and happily you've now brought it up. I just wondered who's going to produce it, and when is it going to be produced? It is obviously of importance, and so as you don't have a member of staff to do it, are you going to take it on board or someone else?
So the shared service with Cardiff will be in place from the 1st of April. The forward plan is the key, one of the key things I've been talking to Cardiff about, and that's a priority. So I expect to have that in the next couple of months.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Do we have any other comments or questions? I don't think so. Now, there was a lot of comment there and a lot of debate, and we were looking for recommendations on material changes, and a lot of that was comment. So I am wondering what we can actually include as material changes. It was definitely the inclusion of the living wage, but that was one that, Matt, you also said was something that we should put in there. I know you were going to go away and you were going to have a look at the perhaps to clarify excess working hours, whether the working time directorate with the 48 hours, whether that is still, it was an EU regulation. I'm not entirely sure either, to be honest, where we are with this. So I know you were going to look at that. In terms of the tenders and the carbon net zero, these are things that are going to become legislation very soon. Certainly with the carbon reduction plan and all tenders over 2 million, these are all things that will be legislation. So I'm not really sure whether there is much that you would do at the moment with that, if I'm honest. And I've given you an awful lot of information. I mean, I'm not sure whether that is something you're going to look at right now, because you have said that this is well, it is a work in progress, isn't it? So.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure how I've articulated it in the actual cabinet report, but it has been my intention that this is more of a living document, because things are changing so rapidly. You can't leave it 3 or 5 years. So I would be looking to update this certainly more frequently than that. So some of the comments that certainly you made and others made, I'd build those into the next iteration of the document.
Okay, that's brilliant. Right then, are we ready now to move on this? I think we've probably debated, we've suggested some material changes, and can I have a hand to move? Thank you, Councillor Hanks, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Woods. Brilliant. Right then, let's move on to agenda item 4.
Bear with me,
which,
Chair. I'm just going to call in the
yeah.
Vice Chair. Bear with me a second.
Thank you. So I forgot Ewan wasn't there, was he? Oh dear, here he comes.
Hopefully, Councillor John should have rejoined us now.
You see him?
Yeah, he should be. Yeah, there he is. Okay.
Welcome back. Okay, so we now move on to agenda item 4, which is a further reference from Cabinet. This is the Corporate Asset Management Plan 2022-2023 from Cabinet on the 27th of February 2023. Over to Lorna. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks everyone for the opportunity to just run through the Corporate Asset Management Plan for 2023 to 28 with you this evening. Apologies for my croaky voice. I'm full up with a cold, so apologies in advance. Hopefully I'll get through it. The Corporate Asset Management Plan has been produced in consultation with officers right across the Council's departments, and it sets the strategy and methodology for managing the Council's land and property assets. Just to give you some context, the Council's been produced several iterations of the Corporate Asset Management Plan since circa 2000, initially in response to the document published by the then Audit Commission entitled Hot Property. Great title, but for those of us who have been asset management planning over the years, it's quite apt. Since that time, we've developed a number of different iterations, as I've said, but each of those iterations of the Corporate Asset Management Plan hopefully have reflected the Council's organisational framework, and certainly this one aims to do that. And those strategic plans, such as the medium-term financial plan, capital strategy, and other key service area plans. The high-level strategic direction established by these overarching plans and strategies provide the main drivers for the organisation and are reflected in the CAMP, which aims to show the role that property assets have in supporting service delivery, most importantly, and how the Council's asset strategy plays a supporting role across all service areas. The Corporate Asset Management Plan deals with all council interests in land and building, excluding the housing revenue account assets and highways infrastructure, which are dealt with separately by other departments. Our long-standing property mission statement, which sets out the long-term aspirations, remains very relevant today, and that's to have a lean, sustainable portfolio that's fit for purpose to support service delivery across the Vale. We had a little bit of a sort of a health check a few years ago by Jones Lang LaSalle, who undertook a bit of a health check, as I said. They determined that the council was well organised, officers' knowledge of the estate and accompanying property systems was robust, and in the consultants' experience, better than many comparable public sector organisations. We do operate a lean and efficient department and have good property management systems and tools at our disposal. And notwithstanding that, we don't stand on our laurels. There's opportunities, and have been in the past, identified for the rationalisation of the estate, and the last iteration of the Corporate Asset Management Plan set out in its action plans some priority actions in relation to those opportunities. For example, we had 2 closely located assets in Lantwick Major, and one of the priority actions was to consider the future of those assets, both of which have been transferred to Glamorgan Voluntary Services. And another example was an underutilised asset in Penarth at South Lodge, and that property is now being let. The priority actions have been taken forward over the period of the last plan. Looking forward, the Council's committed to the sustainable use of our assets going forward, And this commitment, alongside a future period of public sector funding reductions and increasing service demands, really requires us to carefully consider what assets are required, where we need them, how they need to be used. There will be key acquisitions required in some service areas, and other areas will be looking to repurpose or disposing of assets that are no longer required. And that will be done in a way that achieves best value for the residents of the Vale of Glamorgan. We aim to make sure that the plan is consistent with how we're embedding the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act across all of our activities, and our commitment to contribute towards the Public Service Board's wellbeing objectives. Obviously aware that the wellbeing objectives are being looked at the moment in terms of review, so there will be an ongoing review required in terms of the actions as a result of that review, and they'll be reported. Any changes will be reported to Cabinet at the appropriate time. Our asset base remains under review throughout the life of the plan. We'll take a number of different forms, focus work on individual assets and sites as a result of service requests, but also larger scale reviews across larger groups of assets when appropriate as well. So as part of all of that work, we aim to optimise utilisation of land and property, generate capital receipts through the release of sites, as well as identifying sites for development, potentially from a housing development perspective through our housing programme, and to identify revenue producing opportunities by utilising assets differently. There's obviously an ongoing revenue implication for retaining assets, so we'll be looking to identify revenue savings wherever possible. And then one of the other big areas to look at is opportunities for collaboration with public and third sector partners as well. We have a general duty to manage and use our land, buildings and other assets to support work to tackle climate change, rationalising what we need and improving sustainability and energy efficiency wherever possible. We're building new zero carbon schools through our Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, and looking to make existing schools more energy efficient and creating learning environments fit for the future for our students. Finally, I guess that there's looking forward, the priority actions over the life of the new plan that's set out in section 7 of the new corporate asset management plan, and these are aligned to the council's corporate objectives as they stand. As I said, any changes to the wellbeing objectives during the life of the plan will be updated. So our focus for the next 12 months will be around collaboration, compliance with statutory, regulatory, corporate standards for our assets, continued identification of surplus and underperforming assets, and then to ensure the efficient, effective and sustainable use of land and buildings to support service delivery going forward. So I'm really keen to get some feedback. So I'm really happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorna. Councillor Goodjohn, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lorna, for the report. I just wanted to ask a few questions, particularly regarding 3.3, which is property asset condition. Can I ask, because it says that the property team take out these surveys regularly on a rota basis, how often do they take these surveys out on our properties? And also, can we get in future, of course not right now, can I get some information about which of our properties were considered bad? And finally, can I ask a little bit about which properties have not yet been surveyed?
Yeah, sure. I'll try and answer the easy ones first, if I if I can, and I might have to come back to you on some of the more specific questions around condition on some of the specific assets. We try. Well, the aim is to get every condition surveys done every 5 years. I put my hands up. Some of them are a little bit older than that. Some of them are approximately 7 years old. But the older ones we have tried to tackle first. So the education portfolio is probably one of the oldest condition survey sets of data. And all of the primary schools now have been completed and updated by CIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance. Colleagues, they've undertaken those for us. And the aim now is to roll out that programme. And there's an action point in section 7 around the condition surveys and getting a rolling programme over a 5-year period to be developed now going forward. So all of those condition surveys that are sort of beyond that 5-year age limit will now get sort of rolled out over the next couple of years. In terms of which are the worst, in terms of individual assets, I'd have to come back to you on that because I haven't got that data in front of me directly, but we will have, for the assets that we've reviewed over the last couple of months in respect of primary schools specifically, we will have that data. And some of the others will be historical data, obviously, but we can give you an indication of some of that information. Sorry, was there one more question, or was that
no, that's fantastic. I think that's all of them. Can I just come back quickly on asking about? I do see that the action point in section 7 now. Can I just come back on the specific plan towards making our portfolio net zero by 2030? Do we have any specific plans on that inside the management report, or are we going to be including that within Project Zero reports instead?
I think it'll probably be a cross-cutting piece of work through Project Zero, but also through the development of the council's carbon management plan and strategic plan towards net zero. And what we'd be looking at in the next 6 months actually is producing the next iteration of the council's carbon management plan. So that will highlight the areas for further development in terms of the work we need to do on our assets, as well as right across the board in terms of those more difficult challenges around scope 3 procurement activity. So yes, that work will be underway. Some of the detail, I think I can give you rough indication of some of the decarb data relating to assets. Since the declaration of the climate emergency a couple of years ago, the emissions from buildings has decreased by approximately 21%. So that's quite key. There's I think there's about 18 or 20 properties that have been installed with solar PV. And we've been developing a programme of LED light replacement as well across our portfolio. So there's quite a few initiatives that are ongoing or have been actually completed. The decarb programme for the capital programme going forward, where we've submitted some bids for a number of properties, mostly schools, but some residential homes as well, in terms of a range of further LED upgrades and PV photovoltaic solar panels as well. So there's a range of activity going forward in the next cycle as well.
Great, fantastic. Just one last thing. I do apologise for coming back in. Okay. Can I just ask, when you're reviewing the strategy, which groups will this go to review it, and which directorates will be looking at it?
In terms of the asset management strategy or the carbon management?
The carbon management strategy.
Carbon management strategy will be engaging with officers across currently. Just to give you a bit of background, in case you weren't aware, council's assets are held by various departments. They're not held centrally within the corporate estate. So the property section are responsible at the moment for shops portfolio, the residual small holdings estate, and the corporate is the main primary office buildings. The rest of the council's portfolio is spread across the directorates in terms of property ownership. With a small o. So all of those departments will obviously be engaged with in terms of the service leads. We'll also be engaging through the Project Zero board, and I sit on the Project Zero board and will be feeding in the consultation through colleagues on Project Zero board. As is the case with most of our corporate strategies, then Insight board will be considering the recommendations and the draft proposal at the respective time as well. So I think it's I keep saying to colleagues who will listen to me, it won't be a property plan. It's a very much cross-cutting plan that requires a whole council approach, because we all know property is a tiny proportion of our carbon emissions, and whilst we're doing our best from that perspective year on year, with the budget we've got available to us and the resources, it's a much bigger issue, and we're trying to do some work in respect of community engagement as well, and all sorts of different initiatives that you have reports on through Project Board, Project Zero board updates as well. So hopefully it'll be a good piece of work that'll cross all services, but also engage with really whoever wants to be engaged with. I think that's the answer.
Fantastic, thank you, and I hope lots of people engage.
Thank you. Yes, I do too.
That's all of us. That's all of us. And this will come back to us, won't it, as well as ENR, those reports, this scrutiny committee.
Yes.
I think Councillor Goodjohn asked that too. That's great. Councillor Haynes, over to you.
Thank you again, Chair, and thank you, Lorna. I particularly enjoyed the pie charts in the report. I do like a pie chart. I will keep my comments, well, I'll limit to one point, but because time is an issue and some of the others I had were less important. But if I can take you to 5.4.1 Community Asset Transfer Protocol section, there's a line there that it says there have been some significant successes over the life of the last camp in this regard, most notably the 5 community library community asset transfers, which are successful and have demonstrated sustainability and working in partnership with our central library services. So I'm not quite happy with that statement. I wonder what evidence for the demonstration, bear in mind St Athan Library, which I know quite a bit about, has lurched from one financial crisis to another. At one point it had no functioning committee because the chair vanished and the vice chair vanished, and they had all vanished and had all the information. So I do wonder with that, with these asset transfers, what is in place to make sure that these assets that are, their allotments, their libraries, their clubs and societies that provide important functions in the Vale, particularly on well-being. What do we have in place when we pass these facilities over to help maintain them and monitor them? And I think Lorna's frozen. I hope I don't have to repeat that.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I
heard you. I heard you loud and clear,
me
Councillor Haynes.
Or something else on the system. You must be me there. I think I got the gist of it. Around what support we're giving to communities when they take over assets. I mean, this is this is a big issue actually, and I think it's not just the Vale. I think it's sort of national issue. I work quite closely with colleagues from One Voice Wales.
Is it me, Chair, or?
Cymru.
She's breaking up.
Yeah.
Which is the national assets sort of crew, for want of a better thing, support. Am I dropping out?
In and out.
Yeah,
You're going in and
Lorna.
out.
Should I turn my camera off? That might help.
Yeah,
some of the broadband width, maybe. Let me just
yeah.
turn that.
There's extreme
Right.
weather, isn't there, out there?
Any
I think
better?
it.
Yeah, Lorna, the sound seems to be fine now.
Yeah, I think if I can't get the point across, I'm very happy to provide. Great. Okay.
I think you might be right.
Yeah, I
right to me.
Lynn.
I would ask though, can we remove from the report if possible?
Shall I drop you in, Councillor Haynes, with?
Yeah, if I may, I would like the demonstrated success and sustainability to be removed, because I don't think we can demonstrate the success and sustainability. But that's just my viewpoint. But I appreciate if you could just write to me for my comments, and it'll save you struggling with the bandwidth. Thank you.
Lorna, it might be
suggestible
perhaps to log in and log back out as well. You might get better connection.
It might help, mightn't it?
If we are right to
Sure,
do
I'll
that
try
for a
that.
moment.
Bear
Yeah,
with me.
thanks, Lorna.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go dark.
While we wait for Lorna to come back on, Councillor Franks, I know you want to speak, so here she is. Let's hope she can.
How am I sounding?
Yeah, that's much better.
Fine, Lorna.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Councillor Frank. Would you like to just continue with Councillor Haynes? Because sorry, you hadn't finished.
I can do, and I'm very happy to give Councillor Haynes some written feedback as well. I think what I was trying to come across with earlier before I was cut off was we work quite closely nationally with One Voice Wales via the Ystadau Cymru forum. Which is pretty much the national assets sort of working group led by Welsh Government. And some of the feedback that you mentioned today is not uncommon across Wales, actually, in terms of the support that's required for community groups when they do take on assets. It is understood that you can't just hand over assets and expect community groups just to run with them without the expertise and the wherewithal to most of the people who are taking over assets are volunteers and not specialists, and so it is absolutely understood that there is a requirement to provide advice and as much information as possible before the assets are transferred, unless it's something straightforward enough and it's just something that needs grass cutting or something. But on the whole, when you're talking about a building asset, there's a lot more detail that's required to be given to the communities to help them sort of get to a stage where they are comfortable in taking over the asset and running with them. So I know with the libraries, we did provide quite a considerable amount of data and information around condition and the like at the time. But yeah, there's absolutely great deal of learning that went on from that exercise. And I wouldn't say we 100% got it right, but we definitely want to provide as much help and support as we can going forward to any community groups who are interested in taking over assets.
Thank you. Chair, if I may, can I formally move that the comment about what I said, I got to find it again, sorry. The transfers which have been successful, have been successful, have demonstrated sustainability in working with things, be removed from the report, if I may, because I don't think it's demonstrated.
Can I ask Lorna, and it is a very good point, Councillor Haynes, so please don't think I'm dismissing it, but what is our actual definition of sustainable success? Do we have one? Because I absolutely understand what he's saying, and it is a concern of mine. In my ward, there are a couple of community buildings that we are working through an asset transfer, and it is a worry, because I do wonder, once it's happened, and in your regard, and maybe in your definition of this, it was a successful sustainable transfer because the building isn't going to be mothballed anymore. But what happens, as Councillor Haynes has said, when these volunteers, this community group, take it on? There's so much more that they won't know, and everything that you're doing now and you're learning, will there be some form of guidance or something extra that you might be able to provide? Because you can't just leave them, can you? As Councillor Haynes has said, it's a long journey.
It's a really good point, actually, and I guess there's something for the service. There's a big difference between transferring an asset without a service and transferring an asset with the service as well. So I guess the success would come from the continued service delivery through the asset. So there's two pieces to the response, I guess, and I think I probably need to speak to service colleagues to see how successful the service is, and how successful the asset is. But it's an entirely reasonable point, and I think the next time we look at refreshing the community assets transfer guidance, that's something that we would need to look at in terms of how we consider sustainability and success of the asset transfer, because there has been stories across Wales where community asset transfers haven't been successful, and there's probably a number of reasons for that. Sometimes it relates to the organisations themselves having potentially lost interest, people moving away. People deciding they've done their bit and want to hand over to other volunteers, and those volunteers aren't coming forward. And other times, then there's things like pandemics and cost of living crises and energy costs and all that kind of thing that comes into the mix. So there's definitely some learning in all of this. I know Welsh Government are looking at their sort of national guidance at the moment, following the I think it was a Senedd review that looked at community asset transfers across the piece very recently, in the last 6 months or so, I think. So again, I'll be engaging with colleagues across the public sector and One Voice Wales, working through some of the recommendations from that Senedd piece. So we'll absolutely take some of the learning away and consider some of the changes in any new iteration of the guidance.
Yes, and then also with the definition of sustainability and the success of a sustainable outcome, could you clarify that for Councillor Haynes? Because I think
if I may, Chair, the point I was making also was specifically to a statement in the report saying that these libraries were a success. And I know of one that has continually struggled since it took over the asset transfer. And it had struggled because it had no support afterwards, and the building was in a state when they got it. So this is why I'm specifically asking that line to be removed from the report. It is saying that these libraries were specifically a success. And unless I see some evidence of that success, I would really like to see that line removed from the report. And I would like to formally move that we do remove that line, please.
Okay, Lorna, have you a response to that?
No, other than I will pick it up with the library service and engage with colleagues to find out what that particular issue is, and I'll certainly look into that and give you a written response, Councillor Haynes. That's okay.
Thank you.
In
Councillor
clarity,
Cal-
Chair,
Oh,
Chair,
sorry.
in clarity, Chair, if you don't mind, are we removing that line from the report where it says, I repeat it, in general, regarding this type of asset transfer, there have been some significant successes over the life of the camp in this regard, most notably the 5 library community asset transfers, which are successful and have demonstrated sustainability and working in partnership with our central library thing. It is saying these libraries are successful. So what I'm asking, are we removing that line from the report?
Right, so you're saying that your library transfer hasn't been successful, but the others may well have been. Is that what you're saying?
I am saying that they are making the allegation. They are saying in the report that these transfers are successful. I see no evidence in the report, and I have seen evidence of one that is not. So I just would like the report to reflect the facts, because if you go back up further in the report, there's the annual, assessment. Well, this was obviously part of the annual assessment, and I believe that unless we, in scrutiny, make a point of making sure where we see things are not fully as good as the council could do, we can improve them, but we can only improve them if we present factual data and factual reports. That's what I'm just trying to get across there. I appreciate me writing to, and perhaps we can get into some conversation, myself and Lorna, where perhaps we can help future transfers. I'm not necessarily against them. I just think we need to learn, but we also need to produce factual data and factual reports. And it is a scrutiny committee. So thank you, Chair. As I say, I am asking to have that line removed, if that's okay. And I did formally move it. I don't know if that's the correct way to do it, because I am still quite new.
Yes. And so am I. And so am I, Councillor Haynes. And I think...
Just to confirm, Chair, I think Councillor Carroll just seconded that motion.
Oh, I didn't hear him.
Is that right, Councillor Carroll? If so, we can put that to a vote for the committee if they want to go with that motion as part of a recommendation to go back. So obviously we got on the table Councillor Haynes's motion about removing that line from the report. It's been seconded now, so we could go through a vote with that now. But I can see also the leader has come on. I don't know, leader, if you wanted to bring up something before.
Yeah, just for some clarification, thank you. If you look back in the annual delivery plan monitoring reports, if you look back in the reports to Learning and Culture on the library standards, you will see that since their inception, the libraries have increased the numbers, increased the hours open, and increased the participation. The alternative, as we were in the years of austerity, would have been for them to close. So, if it comes back to Cabinet with that recommendation, we'll make sure we have the relevant information, but that's what's been reported to date. They have been a success.
Thank you, leader. Should we take Councillor Frank's comments at this point, or is that okay? He would like to speak.
Thank you.
That's okay.
I'm chomping at the bit to speak, but as I'm a chair of a library committee, but I cannot recall what my dispensation is. So I don't want to go to jail. So I'm just declaring my interest in this matter. It breaks my heart not to speak, but
right, okay.
I will.
So you're not allowed to, right?
I'm not allowed to until I check with Karen tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.
Just on that point, Councillor, do you want me to have a quick look at the dispensation now, just to see where we're at? If committee are happy to hold for a minute.
I don't want to hold up the committee, but that would be lovely.
Yeah, I'll try and have a look now. Bear with me a second, Councillor.
Sorry about this, Chair. What I'm going to do is to make a little file of things I mustn't forget.
To raise your declarations of interest at the beginning. Is that what you
Yeah,
mean? Ah, right,
yes,
okay.
yes. I'm afraid I didn't notice in the papers this was an item, so
Right, okay.
I'm doubly embarrassed.
Chair,
Okay.
can I just ask while we're waiting a moment?
Yeah, sure.
There were no minutes in the agenda.
No, I don't think they were ready this time. So they'll probably
right.
be...
No, that's
thought-
correct,
Yeah.
councillor. There wasn't. They'll be coming to the next meeting.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Look, I'm sorry, Chair, I've caused this disruption. If he can't find it in the next few seconds, I'll just declare and withdraw. I don't want to, but my words will be worth listening to, I assure you.
No, listen, we want everyone's contribution. That's what this is all about.
Right.
Here comes Mark.
Chair and Councillor Franks, just checking dispensation now. It's basically to speak only on matters relating to Dinas Powys Library and Activity Centre, including grant application when being discussed at both Vale of Glamorgan and Dinas Powys Community Council meetings. So obviously Councillor Franks can speak on the matter, but he can't vote. So in terms of a motion now being put forward, he wouldn't be able to vote on that motion, but Councillor Franks can certainly speak on the matter.
Okay, right. Well, there you are. Thank you very much, Chair,
Please
Committee,
go ahead.
and Mark. I understand what Councillor Haynes is saying, but the system in Dinas Powys has been very liberalised. It has given us huge freedom. We've had substantial support from the library service. We regard them as our friends. We could do with a bit more money off the Vale. You won't be surprised to hear me say that, but it has liberated us. We are able to put on events far more than the previous system. We've got something like, I don't know, 50, 60 volunteers. Now, some might be in 3 times a week, others might be in once a fortnight, but it's created a tremendous community. It's hard work, I can tell you, it's hard work, and the trustees do have onerous responsibilities, and success breeds even more work. We're looking to fill every hour of the day and that type of thing. So I sympathise with Councillor Haynes. I know all that he's talking about, and much of what he says is right. But I think it would be wrong to think that is the picture throughout the Vale when it comes to the library service. Thank you for everyone for being so kind with me.
That's okay. Thank you, Councillor Franks. Okay then, so we have a situation here then, don't we, that a motion has been offered up that we remove a couple of words, a statement connected to the success of the sustainability, or the sustainability of the success in terms of the libraries. So I think, Mark, would you like to take over from here?
Bear with me, Chair. Councillor Johnson has his hand up, so there might be a point here before we go into the vote.
Oh, yes. Councillor Johnson, please.
Sorry, Chair. I'm just checking on this because obviously this is a reference from Cabinet. So we don't have the power ourselves to remove a line from the document. We are simply recommending to Cabinet that they remove the line. That's what we're doing. So we're asking them to take one line out of a 45-page document. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that would be right. It would go as a recommendation back to Cabinet for their consideration. Councillor Carroll, I think, Chair's got his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just sorry, I don't think my camera was yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to speak in support of Councillor Haynes' motion and to clarify, because I actually think that at least clarify my interpretation of what Councillor Haynes is proposing, because I actually agree with the comments of Councillor Franks. So I mean, Councillor Haynes, in tabling this motion, isn't saying that no library is working well. I think it's more the point that to say that an entire system is operating effectively when concerns have been raised about specific examples is maybe not an accurate statement. So on that basis, I would be happy to support the recommendation to request Cabinet to remove the wording as proposed, and I would hope that the committee will do likewise.
All right. Okay. Sorry, Chair. I think Councillor Johnson's put his hand up. I don't know if there's something a point on this.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just briefly. I mean, this is obviously this is a report on on our corporate asset management plan, and any comments on the success or otherwise of the the libraries within this are about should be perceived through the prism of the corporate asset management plan, and not necessarily through the prism of the learning and culture side of this. So I mean, I appreciate the comments that he's making, but I mean, if I'm sure Lorna or Councillor Franks will remind me how long it is since the transfer of these took place, because I mean, it's before it's two sets of elections ago, isn't it? We're talking as what, 2016, 2017, around then. So if something is still operational 6 years, 7 years after it was transferred across out of council ownership and it's still in existence, then I would consider that to be successful from the council's perspective of ensuring sustainability of the service that was designed to be transferred out to the community. It's still there, it's still working. If it had collapsed, then I think we'd be then Councillor Haynes would be able to make the point that this hasn't worked and discuss the reasons for it. But if it's still in existence and there are 5 different ones and they're all still there, and I'm not a member of the education, the Learning and Culture Committee, which is discussing these things perhaps on a more regular basis. But from a corporate asset management plan, surely that counts for me as success. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, and I share your view. I think it would be disingenuous to remove a statement when, as you said, these haven't been mothballed, they're still working. Nobody's saying it's perfect, and nobody's saying that every single one of them has found it easy. But from the point of view of demonstrating sustainable success, I think it is fair for them to use that description for where we are. But we are in a position now where a motion has been proposed and it has been seconded. So we must go through the motions here. So Mark, over to you.
Yeah, okay, Chair. I'll go through the list of members, obviously excluding Councillor Franks because of his declaration of interest.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
And just then indicate if members are for or against the motion that's been put forward by Councillor Haynes. So I will start first with Councillor Carroll.
For.
Thank you, Councillor. And then we go on to Councillor Drake.
Against.
With me. And then obviously we can't go to Councillor Franks because he has declared interest in that. So we go on to Councillor Goodjohn, the Vice Chair.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor. Bear with me. Go to Councillor Haynes.
For.
Councillor Hamilton is provided his apologies. So we go on to Councillor Hanks.
Against the motion, please.
Okay. Councillor Johnson.
An erbyn, against.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Prothero, Chair, you next.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor. And we finally go then to Councillor Wood.
For the motion.
Okay, I just want to check now. I've not missed any members. I don't believe I have. In that case, we have 3 for the motion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against the motion. So the motion is not carried, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Oh, do we have any other questions now? No? Okay. Thank you, Lorna. Thank you for that. Sorry we put you through it a bit, but
That's okay, no problem.
Thank
And thanks
you.
for the opportunity to talk to you. Thanks a lot.
That's brilliant. Okay. All right then. So let's go to our
Chair.
recommendations. Yes.
Oh,
sorry,
sorry.
Mark?
I was gonna say about the recommendations. I wasn't sure
Yeah.
you were going to attempt. So apologies, I preempted you there.
I paused a little bit too long, didn't I? Okay. So let's go to the recommendations. So this report has been considered by the committee, and with any comments to be referred back to the cabinet. So I think that we've worked through that. So can I have a hand to move, please, on this? Thank you, Councillor Drake, and a seconder, Councillor Goodjohn. That's brilliant. Thanks ever so much.
Can I just double check, Chair? Are there any sort of substantive comments to go back just to confirm that I haven't missed anything for
No,
the
no.
minutes?
We had questions and then we had a vote on that motion. So no, I don't think so.
Okay, thanks,
Thank
Chair.
you.
Thanks
ever
committee.
so much. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item 5. Which is another reference from Cabinet. This is the Financial Management Code Update 2022-23 for Cabinet on the 27th of February. Thank you very much, Gemma.
Hi, good evening, Chair. So the Financial Management Code was introduced by SITFA a few years ago. We prepared an assessment of our position for the first time in February 2022, and this update looks at our progress during the 22-23 financial year and also prospects for improvement. So the code was introduced and I think largely reflects kind of good financial practice that a lot of organisations had in place, but of course there are always areas that we can improve. And I think when we did the review last year, we felt that whilst the council was in a relatively solid position, there were some areas for improvement. We have had some significant change in terms of our financial management in the year. We've obviously got a new Section 151 officer, and we've also introduced the additional lay members into the Governance and Audit Committee as part of the statutory change. I think when updating the review, we as a kind of senior management team felt that good progress had been made in terms of the collective responsibility element of the Financial Management Code, significantly around the budget, because additional work has been carried out as part of the senior leadership team, thoroughly reviewing all the cost pressures, the reserves and the savings proposals. Now, of course, the review has also been taken to Governance and Audit Committee, and there were some recommendations for amendment that came out of Governance and Audit Committee, so proposing that we introduce an action plan and proposal that we update some of the wording about how we assess risk and the need to potentially implement a risk management workshop. And there was also the proposal that we look to have a peer review carried out in future as part of this piece of work. So we are proposing to incorporate those comments and take an amended version of this report to Cabinet in April, I believe. So we're really keen to get comments from Corporate Performance and Resources, Scrutiny on the report as well, so we can feed that into the amended document. Okay, happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Gemma. Do we have any questions from anybody? It's all gone a bit quiet. Councillor Goodjohn.
I mean, even for the sake of, I've already looked at this at governance and audit, as you partly know, but
I know.
just for the sake of a question, on section 1A of financial management standards, can you give us some information about how you're working to comply more than partly on the assessment with the leadership team, providing value for money?
Well, I think, you know, this is definitely an area where we can provide some additional improvement over time. So we talk about major projects, and we talk about major contracts as part of the senior leadership team, and there's also conversation around the monitoring and the budget reports. But I think where we're drawing out some additional information from some of the strategic procurement work that we are talking about, and we've got more data on how we are procuring and the elements of spend, there's obviously some real opportunities to enhance that kind of understanding of value for money, and for strategic leadership team to think about some of that practices across the organisation.
Thank you, Gemma. Anything else, Councillor Goodjohn?
No, that's quite all right.
That's good. And I think, you know, once you get working on your new procurement strategy and you embed the social value evaluation and the TOMs, you're going to see this. It's I understand why that's partly complying at the moment, but on every other assessment you are fully complying, so that's great. Good news. So I just want to just pause briefly, just for other people to just possibly think of a question if they do have any. I don't want to keep you too long if it's unnecessary, Gemma, but no, okay. Thank you ever so much for that. Right then, so can we just move straight to the recommendations then, if that's okay? So the recommendation was this report to be considered by this committee, and any comments to be referred back to Cabinet. So we don't have any comments, so I think we can now move, if that's okay, to...
Just check, Chair, so as with the other report, there no comments, so we're just noting the report. Just noting the report. If members happy to second it.
Can I have a hand? Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hanks. Do I have anyone else? And thank you, Councillor Drake and Councillor Goodjohn. That's great. Right then, so we will move swiftly on to agenda item 6. We've left the references behind now, and we've moved on to reports of the Director of Corporate Resources. Agenda item 6 is the Audit Wales Springing Forward report. This is the Vale of Glamorgan Asset Management and Workforce Planning. This here is going to advise committee of findings of Audit Wales review of our council's asset management and workforce planning arrangements, and this has been undertaken as part of the Springing Forward National Thematic Review in all Welsh councils. And I think we have Ian Phillips here to talk us through the report. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, these two reports date from summer of 2022, and as you say, they were part of the national thematic called Springing Forward that we did at all 22 councils in Wales. The review focused on strategic management of assets and strategic management of workforce. Regarding the workforce planning, our main finding was that the council's taking steps to improve its workforce planning arrangements, but it still needs to strengthen the application of the Sustainable Development Principle to further shape its approach to workforce planning. That finding was a consistent one over the 22 councils. We say in the report that given the length of time since the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act was enacted, that we expect public bodies to demonstrate that the Act is integral to their thinking and genuinely shaping what they do. We did find positive examples of the Council applying the 5 ways of working, but the first recommendation on page 5 of the workforce report sets out ways in which the Council could strengthen its application of the Sustainable Development Principle. We also found that the Council has improving arrangements to support and monitor the implementation of its strategic workforce plan, its new strategic workforce plan. We took various assurances around that and the development of that, but recommendation 2 on page 6 of the report sets out how we felt those could also be further strengthened. With regards to the assets report, there were a lot of positive findings, such as the Council's good understanding of its current assets, good examples of collaboration in delivering the corporate asset management plan, and the Council's sound arrangements to monitor its current corporate asset management plan. We did find that the Council should more fully apply the Sustainable Development Principle, so a similar finding for the workforce report, and the recommendation on page 6 of the assets report covers that. So that's an overview of both the reports, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. So do we have any questions? Councillor Goodjohn.
Hello again, everyone. Just a quick question on Appendix C. Are you happy with the actions the council have taken regarding trying to strengthen the application of the Sustainable Development Principle? And do you think that we're moving well towards this goal? I'm aware that some of the actions are past their due date, quite a few actually. So are you happy with how those actions have taken place so far and what those actions are?
Yeah, thank you. We haven't formally audited the council's, response to the recommendations, but from a high level oversight of it, yes, it seems appropriate how the council's, planning to take forward both recommendations from each report. So it's something we'll keep in view. We may well follow up more formally at another time, but as it stands, I think it's an appropriate response to our reports.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you. Tom, would you like to join us? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Just picking up on Councillor Goodjohn's point in terms of the 2 action plans in response to the recommendations. By way of explanation in terms of the time between Ian and his colleagues completing the work and us bringing these to committees, because we wanted to make them coterminous with bringing, as Lorna presented, the corporate asset management plan, and many of these actions are reflected in the revision of that plan. And then in terms of the workforce piece, just for committees update, because the agenda being so heavy this evening, we've deferred the people strategy to come to your April meeting. You'll see again many of the points that are in the action plan reflected in that strategy, that when you consider it next month as well. So once committee have considered the action plans in response, these would then go into the insight tracker that we keep an eye on then as part of the insight board's work on a quarterly basis, and we'll be providing regular updates to your committee chair as part of your performance monitoring reports, and also to Governance and Audit Committee and to Cabinet. So just some reassurance in terms of how the recommendations and our associated actions are being taken forward.
That's great. Thank you, Tom. Anybody else got any other questions on this? Or Ian? No? Okay. That's a stunned silence. Thank you, Ian. That was great. Okay then, so if we don't have any more questions and comments, I think we can move to the recommendations, if that's okay. So the recommendations were that committee considers the findings arising from the review of the council asset management Appendix A and workforce planning Appendix B, and the response to the review findings and Audit Wales recommendations that we just looked at Appendix C, and that this report be referred to Governance and Audit Committee and thereafter to Cabinet for their oversight and endorsements of the proposed council actions at Appendix C. So again, we don't have any further comments, so we're noting this, and I think we can move. So can I have a hand? Sorry, Mark.
No, I was only to check.
You're
Chair,
clearing your voice.
Sorry, just wanted to check if we are noting and endorsing the report, and then obviously it'll be referred on to Governance and Audit and Cabinet.
Yes, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you. So can I have a hand to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hanks. That's lovely. Thank you very much, Ian. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item 7, following with the reports of the Director of Corporate Resources. This one is the service levels, activities and performance targets to deliver the Vale of Glamorgan Council's annual delivery plan 2023-2024. So here we are seeking committee's endorsement of the priority actions that are reflected in the service plans and the proposed service performance targets for the period 23-24. And that will deliver the council's annual delivery plan within the remit of our committee. And we have Tom here to take us through this report. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair, and good evening, committee. Thanks very much for seeing this report this evening. As you were saying, Chair, this is now looking at the service plan activities and targets to deliver the annual delivery plan that Council approved on the 6th of March this year. So the report itself sets out a bit of the background in terms of the legislation and our compliance with Future Generations Act and
oh dear, am I the only one who's lost Tom?
Am I back, Chair?
Yeah, you're back now, Tom.
You're back in the room.
My apologies, slight blip this end. I think the weather in Penarth is particularly atrocious this evening. So yes, this is the service plans and targets for the ADP that Council endorsed on the 6th of March this year. The report itself sets out the regulatory background in terms of the Local Government and Elections Act and the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act as being the drivers behind our corporate performance framework. And what we do each year is once the annual delivery plan is established, is look across the 15 areas of the council's services and identify the specific actions that those services are going to take to contribute to each of the annual delivery plan commitments. And the reason for doing that is to demonstrate the integrated way that our annual delivery plan works, whereby multiple service areas often contribute their activity to an annual delivery plan commitment, showing how we work across the organisation to deliver our improvement activity. In July of last year, Chair, we took a report through Cabinet about the Council's annual performance calendar, and that was in response to both a new cohort of elected members, but also importantly feedback we'd had from previous committees around how we report, structure, format and present information around corporate performance. As part of that, we've had a series of informal member working groups, and I'm really grateful for the feedback of elected members as part of those. The most recent of those workshops at the end of January focused specifically on how we ought to be presenting this information because by its very nature is very wide ranging. Some of the suggestions there were that previously we'd appended all 15 of the service plans to the bundles for committee. Those service plans set out individual actions as well as how resources are going to be used, and by their nature are very bulky documents. So you'll see this year, rather than appending them, they're included as background papers for transparency and completeness, but not as part of the formal report, so you don't need to go through those. And instead what we've done is produce Appendix A for you. And what Appendix A does is show for each of the 4 wellbeing objectives within the corporate plan over a 5-year period, what each of the annual delivery plan commitments are that will be contributing to that objective in the coming year. And in turn, for each of those annual delivery plan commitments, specifically within remit of your committee, it lists the individual service plan actions which are proposed to be undertaken. And as a package, committee are asked to consider those service plan actions as to the extent to which they will then deliver on that annual delivery plan commitment. And that's a further streamlining in response to feedback from elected members, whereby the appendix that you're seeing this evening is specific to your committee's remit. So you're not having to go through the myriad of actions that the work has been done, so that it's a bit easier to see. So that's Appendix A, which are the service plan actions, and those service plan actions will be reported to your committee chair on a quarterly basis throughout the coming year for you to be able to scrutinise on performance. The second element of this report this evening is the service performance targets, and they're included in Appendix B to the report. Again, some work has been done to streamline the way that this is presented so that your targets are specific to the remit of the committee. Members will note that some measures will also be reported to other committees. Again, that shows the way that the indicators indicate performance against a range of different actions, which are cross-cutting across a range of different committees. So the first part of Appendix B shows you proposed targets with existing measures. So you'll see some history in terms of performance against those targets over the last few years. It also proposes the level of the target if it's appropriate to set a quantifiable target, and some rationale for doing so. The second part of Appendix B for each of the wellbeing objectives suggests any proposed deletions of indicators and provides some commentary as to why those are being proposed to be deleted. There are also a number of indicators that we're proposing to include in the framework for the coming year. And we've done a lot of work in the last few months with directors and their management teams to look for indicators to go into the framework. We're aware that with some changes at a national level in terms of the way that performance data is collected, that a number of measures have dropped out in recent years. So we're keen to make sure that there's a robust data set behind our work. So you'll see some proposed measures being included there as well for committee's consideration. So that's a very brief overview in terms of the content of the report this evening, and obviously happy to take any questions that colleagues have.
Thank you very much, Tom. And thank you for taking the time earlier this evening for anyone who could come along to explain a little bit more about this. In case anybody wants to see it, it was recorded just to have a little bit more background information, and it's all helpful. So thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Tom? Okay, thank you. Councillor Goodjohn.
Everyone on the committee will be shocked to know I have a couple of questions, and particularly on brand today regarding finance environment. But today I would like to finish the trio with C1V. I do see the new performance indications, including C1V with customer inquiries resolved at first contact, as there had been previously, and with corporate complaints. But I just wonder, considering previously in the year we had concerns regarding C1V and the time it had been taking to pick up the phone, if there could be inclusion of performance target regarding C1V contact time and how long it takes for them to respond to a query, and perhaps even similarly in social media as well, because the time taken to respond within working hours is a big concern of mine, because a lot of actions that take place, lots of concerns that people have can be need speedy solutions and speedy communications as well. So that's that's one of my main concerns. So I'll stop there, and then I'll let you respond, and I'll come back with some more in a minute.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Goodjohn. In terms of Contact One Vale performance being reported, certainly we can look at including a measure, if not two, in terms of the response time to telephone inquiries. The contact centre, as you'd imagine, does record and monitor that information for operational performance needs. So in order to provide that to members wouldn't be a concern to me at all. So we can certainly go in and take a look at that in terms of proposing an indicator to include, and I'll work with the operational manager for customer relations to do that if committee are minded to recommend that to cabinet. In terms of the social media response time, with your permission, I'd like to have a conversation with the communications manager just to understand how that could be best reported. The reason being that not all comments that we would receive via social media would require a response. So it's certain comments are made and they would be acknowledged if necessary, or indeed they may not require a response, whereas others that would in effect be a proxy for a phone call to us or somebody coming into reception would be dealt with in a similar way in terms of referring people to the relevant part of the website or offering to get somebody in contact with them. So it might not be as robust in terms of including a measure on that basis, but I'd certainly be able to go away and have a look at what we could do, if anything, in terms of social media and be able to try and include something, if not this year, perhaps into the future, but something certainly for us to look at doing, because we're seeing obviously an increased amount of transactions in that way. What we could potentially do as well is look at including some further information in terms of the online response time, because we're seeing an increased number of customers now using the new Granicus platform for logging customer requests. So perhaps we could look at maybe some metrics around the number of inquiries via different channels, for example, so that as elected members you could see the kind of mix, but I can certainly take those things away.
That's fantastic to hear. And can I just on that point request that we include both average times and also a target regarding the percentage of people that are over a certain time? Because if you have just the average time, then you are not, you have sways depending on if everyone rushing at the same time on Monday morning, for example. And we both want the average time down, and we also want the percentage of people waiting a long time down. So just including both of those aspects to it. But yeah, that's fantastic to hear. Otherwise, I'd just be interested regarding engaging with the community. People, as everyone will know, there's a lot of confusion regarding some residents regarding what the Vale Council does, or what the police does, or what the Barry Town Council does, and lots of different public sector bodies. I'd also be interested in some kind of measurement of how many requests come in that are not within our remit and how many are, and how well we communicate, how often we communicate that to people. I found people using the online form, and myself included in the past, have not really been informed as to why the council has not taken action and how best to follow up on that, particularly regarding online contact. So yeah, just anything regarding that would be much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And it may well be that we won't again record information that would give you a complete picture in terms of if somebody comes to us and via the phone, for example, and it's something that would be a Barry Town Council inquiry, for example, we would signpost them to Barry Town Council, but we would record that as being information that's been provided to the customer, and we would see that as being the inquiry dealt with. We may not be able to distinguish the types of inquiries where that's not within our remit versus actually somebody asking what day their refuse collection is, for example, and again we would give the information and close that contact down. But what I can do is, I know that we're looking at arranging a visit for your committee to Contact One Vale in the next couple of months, and a more detailed report to committee in terms of the activity that's underway within customer relations. And perhaps we could explore that aspect as part of that report and that visit as well. And that might lead us then to how we could develop systems to be able to record information in that way.
That's very interesting, Tom. Thank you very much for that. And however you want to deal with that, so long as there's some action on it, I'm happy. Whatever works best for the organisation. Don't want to twist things around it too much. And finally, I'll just end on this. Can we get some kind of target regarding the number of Project Zero plans delivered, and particularly regarding when we're changing our assets or our plans are delivered? Can we get some kind of performance indicator regarding what percentage of that is actually delivered on time, on target?
Absolutely, and I would propose that we would address that in a couple of ways. One is through the regular reporting that we'll be bringing to your committee, Chair, and to Environment and Regeneration in terms of Project Zero. And we've taken on board the comments of both committees in terms of a call for more detailed information in terms of performance, and how that's reported to yourselves as elected members against the 18 challenges in the Project Zero Challenge Plan. We have also included some specific indicators within the framework this year. Predominantly, they sit aligned with the Environment and Regen Committee, but that are indicative of progress being made against those Project Zero schemes. And then in terms of the actual sort of capital type projects that are being delivered, I think Councillor Franks asked this at a previous committee as well, in terms of providing additional information about those schemes. Again, we'll be looking to reflect some of that in the Project Zero reports as a standalone piece, but we will also be reporting on progress against those schemes as part of the capital programme monitoring as well. So you'll see it in a number of different ways, as well as the performance information here.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And subject to that, I don't see any other hands, but maybe this is premature, but I'd move it.
Okay, shall we just quickly see if anyone else has any comments at all, if anybody does? Okay, that's great. Right then, so we will move to the recommendations then, which are that committee reviews and endorses via recommendation to Cabinet the planned service activities for 23-24 as they relate to the remit of our committee, and that committee reviews and endorses via recommendations to Cabinet the proposed measures and service performance targets for 23-24 relating to the remit of this committee, which is in Appendix B. Now, there were two recommendations. Can we put those forward to Cabinet as well for inclusion, Mark? Or do we just have to endorse it?
You can endorse and note the points, Chair, but in terms of Appendix B, the recommendations are off the back of that. Am I right from Councillor Goodjohn? The comments he made around C1V and the Project Zero?
Yes, because he's asking for specific inclusion of indicators so we can measure the response times and have a target as well. And I think that Tom has said that that would be possible. So that's so that was an addition. I know that he was going to go away and have a look at the social media question. So that's not for inclusion, but it's for comment. And I think he also said that they'd be able to include online response times to the grant when people, online through Granicus. So I don't want to make this difficult for you, Mark, but if those recommendations can go along with the endorsement, that would be great.
Yeah, of course, Chair. As long as we've got the committee's support on that, we can take those forward to Cabinet.
Thank you.
If someone's happy to second those.
Can we have a seconder? I think That's great. Thank you, Councillor Hanks and Councillor Drake. That's marvellous. Thank you, everybody. We will now move on to agenda item 8, sticking with the report of the Director of Corporate Resources. So this is the annual delivery plan monitoring report, Q3 performance for 22-23, and the progress against the external regulatory recommendations and proposals for improvement. Back to Tom. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. And with your permission, I'll just share my screen so that I can run you through the presentation that's included in your bundle this evening.
Thank you.
It's that moment of panic to make sure it's come up. Is that showing for you now, Chair?
Yeah, that's great.
First hurdle overcome. So you'll see as you do regularly in this presentation, some links to the risk register, to the absence report, the Insight Board action tracker, that's where those regulatory report recommendations are, and an overview of Q3 performance. But what I can give you is a summary of those aspects now, and just make sure that that's on the screen for you. So in terms of the overall RAG status for the annual delivery plan at the end of Q3, the status is green. You can see that the status for actions across all 4 of the objectives is green, and the status for indicators is amber across the board. And when we aggregate those, the status is green for the plan as a whole. Particularly within remit of your scrutiny committee, Chair, the presentation includes some information about what's been achieved within the quarter, drawing attention to the award of Race Equality Matters Bronze Trailblazer status during the quarter. That's in recognition of our work to address racial inequality through the creation of safe spaces and support for the diverse network. We've started work on the age-friendly veil programme with the new officer in place in order to be able to progress on that work. The completion of the annual canvass in terms of polling, so that the electoral register is accurate and up to date at the end of the calendar year. And there's some information in here in terms of the engagement that's been done, for example, on priorities with the ADP that we were just discussing, and the PSB's wellbeing plan that is on your agenda later on this evening as well. In terms of objective 2, we won the Delivering Social Value Award at the Ystadau Cymru Awards held in December. That was for the partnership work with Ogmore by Sea Village Association on the community hall. The report also mentions a number of apprenticeship places being created across a variety of different council departments, and then also some work around working with broadband providers to further the availability of superfast broadband schemes across the communities and businesses in the Vale of Glamorgan. Within the 3rd objective around supporting people at home and in their community, we talk here around the work that libraries have been doing in terms of their programme of wellbeing events. The work on the maker spaces in Penarth and Barry are well advanced. They're focusing on some work with younger people. And the report also talks about the Move More Eat Well plan, which is a partnership plan with ourselves, Cardiff Council and Public Health. And this particularly looks at the Golden Pass project, where older age adults with low activity levels were promoted to get involved in further physical activity, and 550 participated. We've spoke at committee recently as well around the work that we're doing on supporting people with the cost of living, and the report references the More Than Food Hub, which is now operational in Llandrwyd Major. That brings together a range of different partnership organisations alongside GBS and ourselves to provide support through advice and also food support as well. And then in terms of objective 4 around respecting, enhancing and enjoying our environment, the report talks about the installation of automatic water meter readers for water consumption across the estate as part of Project Zero, looking at monitoring and then being able to respond to water leaks much quicker than we have been previously. Also some work around supporting staff and elected members through hybrid working, reducing carbon emissions, and also extending the use of electric vehicles within the council's fleet. So chargers for the new pool cars being operational at the Alps depot, installation has now been completed at the civic offices. And we also have got a new programme manager in place now for Project Zero, and she's doing some really great work in terms of progressing that agenda, and you'll see that in the forthcoming report to committee. In terms of the specific remit of your committee, Chair, this slide gives you a breakdown in terms of progress of actions and measures in delivering the annual delivery plan. As ever, councillors are provided with a link to some exceptions, so whereby where there's red status for the 21 actions that are referenced here, and also the 4 measures which have got a red status, and that appendix provides a commentary in terms of what's being done in order to redress that performance. And those things inform the areas for future focus and improvement. So we know, for example, that we want to take some further action in terms of absence of council staff. We also need to take some further work around corporate complaints and the number of or the performance of our social media, albeit we are changing our approach to social media with fewer individual posts, and therefore we would potentially see the reach dropping while we transition to doing that. Next month, you'll see, as part of the people strategy, the volunteering strategy. So the committee will have the opportunity to scrutinise that, and also to get some update on the employee attraction strategy as part of that particular piece of work. We know that we've got further work to do in terms of working with our council managers to increase the number of apprenticeships, and again that's going to be addressed in the people strategy that your committee will see next month as well. In terms of supporting people at home and in their community, work continues around the offer of support for citizens and staff in terms of the cost of living, particularly around warm spaces and the provision of food and advice, as well as financial support through the council's benefits teams. And then finally, in terms of future focus for Objective 4, we talked earlier, the asset management plan associated with that will be the carbon management plan, and whilst we've had some delays in producing that because of staff resources within the property section, we have now commissioned that piece of work to be undertaken to bring that back on track. And we also want to progress the LED streetlight conversion programme. And whilst there has been limited resources within our organisational development and learning team, I'm pleased now that that team is back to full capacity, and we're starting to progress and work around supporting behaviour changes in transforming services associated with Project Zero. So that's a really quick overview in terms of the performance as at Q3, Chair. Obviously happy to take any questions that you or members have.
Thank you, Tom. Committee, any questions? Councillor Goodjohn.
Hi, again, just a quick question regarding staffing, really. So actions, particularly regarding the carbon management plan 2023 to 2030 has been slowed down. Partly, it says here, because of the energy team being depleted with staff resources for different things, including the cost of living payments. And also the LGBT action plan. Can I ask quickly, I noted that the performance indicator for full-time staff equivalent full-time working days lost was up to 9.4. Are you having any difficulty with that at all? Is there something we need to be particularly concerned about, or are you sure that we can get it back on track in the next quarter?
In terms of the updates on actions, Councillor John, that you've just asked, actually they illustrate a range of different pressures that are on the council from a workforce perspective. So there is definitely concern around the level of absence, and the report talks about some of the remedial action. And I know at committee we've spoken around doing further work there to support people's well-being and also to support them to come back to work sooner. And I spoke with colleagues at my management team yesterday about how we can be taking some of that action forward. And I know when Tracy talks with yourselves about the people strategy next month, some of that activity will be complementary to the discussion that you had at committee recently. And at the same time, alongside other local authorities, we are experiencing difficulties in terms of attracting and retaining staff, certainly in some of the more technical specialisms, and the energy service within properties is a good example of that, where we're seeing an increase in demand for people with decarbonisation and energy skills because of the commitment around 2030 net zero, which is a really positive thing, but it means that there are only a finite number of resources, and some of that plays back then into the commitments we've got in the annual delivery plan around, and certainly as well as part of the capital region, in terms of increasing the skills within those new areas of activity, so that in effect we're able to ensure that in the future we've got sufficient resource, and as part of that the apprenticeship schemes are a really important part. What we have done, I've worked with Lorna to explore some options around the energy service. The asset, so the carbon management plan is a really important kind of pathway plan for how we're going to achieve net zero in certain aspects of our operations, and we don't want to delay that any further. So we have commissioned that work from an external provider in order to bring us back on track. Lorna's also worked to bring in some additional resource within the energy team in order to then be able to take that work forward. So it is meaning that we're having to think creatively about how to address those skills gaps, but we're taking a collection of different types of activity to try and do that.
I know it's a follow-up question, so I don't expect you to have it. Please feel free to let me know afterwards. Can you let me know what the cost of that hiring external team for that was? And also, just a quick side note regarding the Workplace Equality Index. I know it's past February now. Have you had a chance to have a look at it and any initial thoughts? If not, that's completely fine.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. With your permission, I will come back to you in terms of the cost of the external consultancy. I haven't got it to hand, but what I can provide assurance to committee is that that's being paid for from existing resources within that budget as a result of the vacant post. So it's not coming as an additional cost to the council. In terms of the Workplace Equality Index, for other members' information, that's the work that Stone will do with us in terms of our LGBTQ plus action plan and our support for the GLAM network. We are doing some work with that network to in effect revitalise them. The chair of the network has recently got a new job with the health service, so it's we're doing some work now to get them up and running, and the action plan that's in place to respond to our findings, which saw us increase in terms of our rankings, is kind of well established. So there's some further work that obviously is required, and some of that will take place as part of the Welsh Government's LGBTQ plus action plan. That one has only recently been published, and what we're doing is completing the work on the Anti-Racist Wales action plan, and then starting work on the LGBTQ plus one. So some further information will come. That was a very long-winded way of saying that yes, there is work underway, and some further updates will come to you in due course.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tom. I must say I particularly liked Appendix B and C. It shows me to be quite sad, I know, but it's they're clear, concise, and easy to follow. I love them. Anyway, couple of things. One is more of a comment. I'm a bit concerned the warm space is not going to reach the more rural parts of Vale before summer, and therefore not necessarily needed. I do think that if this is needed for next year or wish to be continued for next year, that perhaps reaching out to public houses might be an easy way to achieve some warm spaces for the more rural members, residents of the Vale. That's just a comment. Now, on to the elephant in the report, I'm afraid. FSA A008, Oracle. I'm really quite concerned this continued slippage. I think it's unacceptable. And I'm beginning to think we need to have some sort of investigation of the complete project from the initial contract, so we know what we wanted from it and what we expected from it as well. And also what we now think we need from it, because obviously I suspect the project has changed. I'm also concerned about these external consultants. What do they do? How much they cost? And why did we need them? And also, you know, the cost implications. We're cutting services in the Vale, and we're wasting money on slippage. So, you know, I think we need to grab it, and not so much because there is always an excuse. There is always a reason for the slippage, but it's something more fundamental in this project, I think. And I think we need a proper investigation, perhaps with elected members on it. I leave that up to more senior people than me, to just try and get to the bottom of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Tom, do you have any further comments on the Oracle rollout slippage?
Certainly, and firstly to thank Councillor Haynes for the comments around the presentation of clear, concise and easy to follow information. Finally getting there on performance reporting, so that's appreciated and good to hear, and certainly in terms of your comments around warm spaces, definitely take those on board, Councillor Haynes. We're very keen to reach as many people as possible, not necessarily just for warm spaces, but actually really about tackling isolation, loneliness and providing information, support and advice to people on a range of different things, and I can provide some reassurance that I met with the team this afternoon to talk about that work and how we're going to take that forward, and how indeed it will morph from potentially being warm spaces into that more broad support for people, because the cost of living crisis is not going to stop just when the clocks go back and the temperature warms up. In terms of Oracle, in terms of the continued slippage, we are working now towards the go live of the Oracle Fusion project from the 1st of April, as is advised in the papers, and I know that as part of discussion at committee chair in the autumn, when we were discussing this as part of the financial monitoring, that I think a recommendation was made by the committee that a lessons learnt type report should be undertaken and brought to your committee at an appropriate time, and I think Cabinet, well, I know Cabinet noted that request, and it is certainly the intention, Councillor Haynes, that we will be bringing that report. I can provide you the assurance that the project team continue to work incredibly hard in a very proactive way to make sure that that fundamental business system gets introduced as quickly and as safely as possible. It is responsible for the council's financial, payroll and HR and procurement services. So whilst speed and expediency is important here, it's also important that we get this absolutely right, and that is something that we are looking to do, and to make sure that the quality of that delivery is done in an appropriate way. So we will be bringing a further report, and certainly I've made a note of some of the specific things that you were asking in terms of whether the project's changed, is it as expected. now versus when it was initially commissioned, and some of the arrangements around the contracting and the use of consultancy and specialist support. And I will ensure that those things are covered in that report once it's brought to you. And the reason for looking to bring it to you and the phrase in due course was so that we can fully reflect on the project end to end once it goes live in April, which is something that we are on track to deliver.
Thank you, Tom.
And only 2 weeks away, I hasten to add.
I've got a very relieved payroll team in 3 weeks, Chair.
Oh, goodness. I mean, it is a huge undertaking to replace a system of that size, I know, but we have been exasperated, as I'm sure you have, with how long it's taken. But you know, we don't want to compromise on the quality, so absolutely. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And it's just really to echo Councillor Haynes' points, particularly regarding the Oracle system. I mean, there is a danger when you see costs spiralling like they have on this project, and I accept the comments that both you and the Chair have made regarding the size of it. I get it's a big project, and I get that occasionally, well, not just occasionally, sadly it happens fairly often with big projects like this, when you're putting in place a significant change, that costs and unexpected issues occur throughout the process. But I do think there is a concern there that this project, the way the costs have just added on and added on and added on, there will be a concern that people, when it comes to procuring services in future from the authority, will see what's happened with this project and think, well, I don't necessarily have to make realistic bids for projects because for work, because ultimately it can just get extended, it can carry on, and then I can say, oh, I need more money, or I need to do this, I need to do that, and then the council will just pick up the tab. Now, I'm not saying that that is the case. What I'm saying is that when you see a project go over budget like this, there is the danger that others looking in, and we've discussed the procurement process earlier, will think, I can get away with that. And I think it's important that we do get to the bottom of exactly why these costs have come in at so much larger than they were initially budgeted for. And it's important that we, if there are lessons that need to be learned, it may be when that analysis is carried out, these costs were unavoidable and there was nothing that could have been done about it. But unless we get to the bottom of that, those lessons won't be learned if they need to be learned. And I think that's an important thing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carroll. Within this reflections document, that when it has actually been implemented, I guess we can also have some information on increased costs, can't we, Tom? And the reason why this has happened. Today, we're looking at performance exceptions. We're not looking at any financial connection with this particular issue. So that's for another day, but that would be really helpful if that's okay.
Absolutely, and only to add that the report that we took to Cabinet on the 22nd or 29th of September is an update on Oracle. I hope demonstrates for Councillor Carroll and Councillor Haynes the willingness to provide some of that information when it's when we can do. So that does provide a breakdown of the changing costs and some of the rationale. But I absolutely take on board the points that Councillor Carroll and Councillor Haynes is making, and we will definitely ensure that those are incorporated in that report when it comes to you.
Good. Councillor Carroll, you want to come back in?
I do think it's important, though, that I get that perhaps this isn't an item to be talking about costs, etc. But I think that when we analyse performance, it is important that we're getting what we've paid for, so that if you agree a specific price for a service or a product, and then that product isn't performing, or that service isn't performing in the way you were told or expected it would to for the agreed price, then clearly there are performance aspects to it. And I think it's important that we don't completely separate the two, because obviously if I buy a car and then that car doesn't perform, i.e. it doesn't work, I would say that that's a performance issue, and I would say I paid for that car to perform and it's not performing. So I would just put that point on the record.
Yeah, and that's great. Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. What I am trying to clarify here is that we don't have this information in front of us. So we don't know if the implementation and the reason why it's taken longer is to do with that. And that's why we need to not look at it differently, but when this reflection document of the whole process comes out, to also include in there the things that you would like to know. Thank you. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that reasoned overview. I was just going to say is that there have been update reports on the situation, and as Tom has said, there will be a reflection subsequently. In most large contracts, there are areas where sort of contingencies have to be used, and there are areas where things change, because when you're working in such a complex situation as changing financial systems in one of the Vale's largest employers, then it's going to be, there will be challenges, some which will mean delays or increased costs, some that won't. So when we get to the reflection document, we can have that. You can't really compare it to buying a car. With a car, it could be that there was something wrong with the car. It could be that there was something wrong with the driver. Who knows? But when we get that reflection document, we will be able to have a full discussion on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else who'd like to ask Tom any questions about this particular report? No? Okay, that's great. Well, if that's the case, we'll move to recommendations. And that's that the committee considers the performance and progress towards achieving the ADP commitments, and that committee considers the remedial actions to address underperformance, and also if there were views and recommendations to Cabinet for their consideration and approval. Also that committee reviews the progress made to address the recommendations and improvement proposals made by our external regulators, and upon review to recommend to the Governance and Audit Committee and thereafter to Cabinet the removal of completed actions from the Insight Tracker as relevant to the remit of this Scrutiny Committee. So I think we had a view that we wanted the site of a reflections document when the Oracle project has been implemented. But apart from that, I would like to see a hand now for moving on this item. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Drake. That's wonderful.
Chair,
So,
just before you go on, obviously we got the comment on the reflections document
yes.
for Oracle to go forward. We also have on there as well around the actions that have been completed to go back to Governance and Audit Committee and thereafter to Cabinet. So I believe there are a number of actions, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, that are now completed or business as usual that can be taken off the Insight Tracker.
Yes, that's
they
right,
can go.
Mark.
Yeah,
they're the ones that are contained in the link that I described on page 1 of the presentation. Thank you, though.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So what will happen if a committee are happy to endorse those? They will go on to Governance and Audit, and be taken off the Insight Tracker if they're finally approved.
Thank you. Right then, if we can then now move on to agenda item 9. We're sticking with the reports of the Director, Corporate Resources. This is revenue monitoring for the period the 1st of April to the 31st of January 2023. This is to advise committee of the progress that's been made relating to revenue expenditure for the period the 1st of April to the 31st of January 2023. Over to Gemma. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Very conscious that you had the revenue monitoring to the end of November to the last committee, but there are some key changes that I would like to draw out as part of this report. So as part of this budget report, we have allocated an extra £1.5 million to schools within 22-23, so that delegated schools budget has increased, and that's funded by additional council tax income that's been collected in year. So I suppose whereas in the past we would have reported a surplus within the against the council tax budget line, this year, in order to increase the budget allocation for schools, we have increased the council's overall budget to enable us to increase the delegated budget for schools, reflecting an increased council tax budget. The other significant change that I would want to draw out within the report is that we have some additional pressures that we're reporting within the neighbourhood services part of the report. I think we have in previous reports reported pressures around market forces uplift for the waste management drivers and some additional support to council's leisure centre provider as a result of COVID. So that there's been a slight increase there. So I think previously reported 500,000 and that's now reported increased to 650,000. And we also are reporting pressures on the recycling treatment pressure and severe pressure on the council's highways pothole budget. Now, these overspends are being offset by a mix of drawdown from the council's reserves. So there is significant drawdown from the neighbourhood services and transport reserve. There's also some transfer in from the waste management contingency reserve and the civil parking enforcement reserve. And there's also offsetting of those overspends from the projected underspend within the policy budget. We also continue to report pressures around school transport, and that's being offset by a mix of drawdown from reserves, other underspends within the Learning and Skills Directorate and potential underspend within policy. We have a projected drawdown from schools reserves in the region of £6 million. We are projecting to transfer some additional funding into the social services reserve, and that reflects a one-off adjustment for how we account for income in 22-23. We're also reporting a projected underspend of £3 million within the policy budget. That's offsetting some of the overspends that I previously mentioned, school transport, some of the additional 22-23 pay awards, additional market forces to payment to waste drivers, a contribution to the pothole overspends, and also the Oracle implementation overspend as reported on the previous item. Within the report, we've also updated Table 8, and that shows a slight reduction on the drawdown of reserves for capital purposes, which reflects the slippage in the capital programme. We are now reflecting a projected drawdown on schools reserves of 6 million, which wasn't previously reflected in the report. In terms of the treasury management part of the report, the council's continuing to utilise internal borrowing, so really minimising where it's taking out any additional loans in the context of relatively high interest rates. And we're also benefiting from some additional surplus as a result of our investments in year because interest rates are higher. So those are the main points I wanted to draw out in the report, but I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Gemma. Anybody got any questions for her, please? Councillor Haynes. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, Chair, me again.
Don't be sorry, please.
I got 3 items, if I may.
Yeah.
Thanks for the report and thank you, Chair. And if you don't mind, I'll take them one at a time because it's easier for me. And excuse my ignorance on this. 211 in Table 2, I think it is, schools long-term supply scheme overspend. Could you clarify that for me? It doesn't. Are they supply teachers or what?
So, apologies. The Learning and Skills Directorate operate a kind of a sickness scheme. So schools can opt into the scheme and opt to have potentially cover maybe their teachers or their teachers and their long-term LSA staff, and they can have so for instance they might cover those members of staff from the 3rd day of sickness,
Right.
and it covers the supply costs of covering those staff. So I suppose theoretically it's kind of like an insurance scheme that is operated by the service, but the future of that scheme does need to be reviewed in the context of the overspend that's being reported.
Oh, thank you. That clarifies it fully. The same sort of question on table 4. Liaison and engagement officer temporary posts. I wondered what they were and how long is temporary, really?
Okay, so these are posts to support attendance within schools, I believe, and the posts were initially Welsh Government funded, and I think this is something that came certainly it emerged during the COVID period, if not as a result of COVID, and in order to continue those posts, as the Welsh Government grant has fallen out, there is some drawdown from reserves to fund those posts.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just one last one now. It's 2.6. It's just I'm a bit concerned that we constantly reminded that local authorities are in trouble and under extreme financial pressure. And I'm worried about the potential risk as we, lend them money. And should we not be reducing our exposure in this market?
When the council lends to other local authorities, there is a level of protection in terms of those amounts that are loaned. So essentially there is I can't remember the statute now, I apologise, but I can clarify it. But there is a statute that kind of underwrites that lending. So to a certain extent, we have kind of surety around statements that have been made around local authorities not being allowed to fail, and off the back of the kind of UK government position, but also we also do a review. So we do kind of maintain a list of local authorities that we wouldn't lend to. That's not always, doesn't always capture all the local authorities we shouldn't lend to, but then there is that kind of statutory underwriting of those loans as well.
Okay, thank you. And you don't need to send me the statute.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else with any questions for Gemma? No? Gemma, can I just ask you quickly, because it's been on the news recently, I think the Senedd member for Education has made another offering to the unions for teachers' pay, hasn't he? And
yes,
that was for last year, let alone this year. So I think I've seen in the report there are indications that this would be covered by Welsh Government, but are we sure that that will definitely happen?
I think some of the feedback from unions has been that there needs to be the offer needs to be fully funded, and that was certainly reflected in the Welsh Government statement that the initial offer would be fully funded, and I think there's a drive to try and get the 22-23 accounts accurately reflecting certainly a step towards what the likely pay position is. In terms of the proposals around next financial year, that does reflect the current pay offer does reflect what's it has been budgeted for. So 23-24 is slightly more straightforward, but we'd certainly if the funding isn't forthcoming, it is going to place, if it wasn't funded by the council's reserves centrally, we would see a number of schools entering a deficit position that otherwise wouldn't be. So certainly what I've read in terms of the statements from Welsh Government, and my expectation is that will be funded. But we, of course, wouldn't be able to reflect any Welsh Government funding without a grant award or some clear obligation. But that payoff isn't reflected in the figures that you have in front of you today.
No. Well, it's not being finalised, has it? So what can you do?
Yeah.
It is a concern, isn't it, when you're looking at 8-9%, whatever's been bandied around. If we had to find that money, gosh. Anyway, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, one of the other areas, Gemma mentioned the additional payments to leisure centres as a result of the contract and sort of the gap that's emerged post-COVID. Just similar to the discussion we had about Oracle year before, we did ask for a report on this back in our meeting in October, and obviously we're nearly 6 months on with the new financial year shortly. And the concerns that we were looking to have, looking for assurances that there were solutions to this situation in the the medium to longer term. I'm just wondering if you know what's being planned, on that, Gemma. I mean, because it's just obviously you mentioned that amount increasing in year. Thanks.
Councillor Johnson, I think. Partly that just reflects the updating of the monitoring position. So my understanding, but I will take this away and confirm back, is that the payments that related to that falling away of customer attendance ceased as at the end of December, and therefore no payments are being made over and above that. But I will clarify the position for you and feed that back. And I note that an additional report was requested, so I will chase that up as well.
Thank you. And it was good to see today in the budget that there is funding for English swimming pools. I saw that. I think the cost of heating them is putting a lot of them in jeopardy, isn't it? Yeah. Right, do we have any other questions on this report for Gemma? No, that's great. Okay, so it's been a long night, so let's move on to the recommendations, if that's okay with everybody. So that is that the position with regards to the authority's 2022-2023 revenue budget be noted, and that members note the arrangements to offset the projected overspends in 22-23 as set out in this report. That members note the revised 22-23 revenue budget of 290,574,000, reflecting an increase of 1.5 million for the delegated schools budget to be funded from additional council tax income. So can we have a hand to move that, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Drake. Wonderful. Thanks, Gemma. Right, so we're now swiftly moving on to agenda item number 10, sticking with the report of the Director of Corporate Resources. This is capital monitoring for the period the 1st of April to the 31st of January 2023. This is to advise committee of the progress on the 22-23 capital programme for the period the 1st of April 22. I can see a hand. Councillor Drake, did you want to speak or?
I'm sorry, I thought I switched it off.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. It just suddenly caught my eye in mid flow, so I thought I'd better just ask in case I'd missed something. Okay, so where was I? So we're on the capital programme for the period the 1st of April 22 to 31st of January 23 within the remit of this committee. So back over to you, Gemma. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the capital position, I mean, I think we're continuing to report pressures that have been reported throughout the year, so and have been discussed to a certain extent in this committee meeting tonight. So continuing challenges around cost increases, requiring scheme re-engineering or re-tendering, or seeking additional funding. Project officers are reporting long lead time on the delivery of materials. We are experiencing shortage of skilled staff in some areas, which is causing delay. We are requesting £8 million of slippage as part of this report. So the approved programme is currently being reported at 88 million. We're requesting that's reduced to 79.6 million. Spend to the end of January was reported as 43 million. So a significant amount of expenditure still to hit the ledger. Appendix 1 details the financial progress on the capital programme as at 31st of March by scheme, and Appendix 2 summarises position over directorate, and then details movements in year. The report details delegated authority requests that have been approved and also notes the use of emergency powers. We have included a new section in the report that reports the progress on the capital programme and then a percentage of schemes completed, in progress and on target for completion. And that does show relatively good achievement of schemes, although it should be noted that there was quite a lot of complexity around reflecting that position for housing, and therefore at the moment that table doesn't reflect the position of housing, but we will continue to look at how we can do that accurately going forward. We are trying to draw out some schemes that have been completed in years. So we talk about Barry Library Makerspace, the Bus Stop Infrastructure Grant and the ULEV grant. And we're also requesting to make amendments to the capital programme, and that includes carry forwards against the Housing Improvement Programme and the new Household Waste Recycling Centre at Landau. Happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Gemma. Councillor Goodjohn.
First off, just a more general question. I'm aware that our actual spend is only about, sorry, I don't have the figures up at the very moment. I think it's 43. Thank you very much. 43 million. Of course, you're requesting 8 million or so in slippage, but what I'd expect at this point is that you'd know most of the programs that are going to need slippage. So I would hope, and I suspect this is not going to be the case, but I would hope that no more slippage would be needed or very little would be needed in the next quarter. I'm just aware that since there's only been 43 million in spend and we're expecting to spend 80 million, we only have one quarter left, that there's going to be even more slippage than this and quite a significant amount. I would just ask that we try and be aware of where slippage is going to happen a bit earlier than this.
No, absolutely, Chair, through you. I mean, I think the slippage position is something that we're constantly trying to address. So we're reflecting really accurate profiles, and we have gone out and just reaffirmed that the figures that are being reported are as accurate as people are able to reflect in year, and also given people the assurance that should they slip funding and they find that they're able to deliver a scheme, that that funding could potentially be brought forward, so that they're not losing that opportunity to deliver a scheme on time. There is some schemes, including the programme, where spend can hit the ledger incredibly quickly. So around some of the school investment programme and indeed the housing improvement programme, where we have the scheme around modular buildings. So I think that those spend can be accumulated really quickly, and so it is possible that we'll see some significant increases in spend there. And we've also got a backlog in terms of schemes being charged to capital from our internal building trading account. So that will account for some of the smaller schemes expenditure that isn't showing on the ledger as well, where we're reporting that scheme is complete within the report. So it's a really a mixed position. I mean, I think I would expect there to be some additional slippage as part of the capital outturn report. Obviously, there's a significant gap, but we're trying to address that position as much as possible. But I appreciate there's more work to be done there.
And
this is sorry, go on. Sorry, Councillor Goodjohn.
No, of course. I simply wanted to bring in on a different point. So if you had it on that point, then go ahead, Chair, but if not, I just wanted to ask about energy efficiency. I think this might be better to answer in writing, but 909,000, I do apologize, 909,000 as a slippage has been requested from Environment and Regeneration on energy efficiency. I was just wondering if this has been reflected with revenue considerations or budget considerations in the future, since obviously the savings from that won't come for next year, but that's it.
Apologies, Chair. I'm just, is this on the the electric vehicles?
I do apologise. This is energy efficiency from Gingham on the Appendix 1.
Sorry, Chair. I'm just.
No, fine. Environment and housing.
I'm just waiting for my PDF to catch up with the, the screen. Apologies. Oh, within the housing improvement programme?
Yes.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. I need to go away and just clarify that position. But obviously, it's such a large scheme made up of multiple projects. I would imagine that I'll need to give you a slightly more detailed answer for that. So I'll get something turned around in writing on that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely expected. Okay, thank you very much. That's all from me.
Thank you, Councillor John. Councillor Haynes.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gemma. It's just a curiosity I've noticed in the report. 2.11, Penarth Leisure Centre, high-level glazing. The scheme is going to be carried out in the winter. They're putting it in slippage to carry it out because they think it might be better to carry out glazing in the winter. And I think it just comes across as a curiosity in the report. I don't know anyone who does their glazing in the winter.
That's an excellent question, and I wish I had an answer for you, but unfortunately I don't. So I will clarify the position on that.
I'll leave it with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a good point, and I suppose it's, you know, committee should remember they're reporting on the spend finance, aren't they? You know, they are told, I suppose they're a bit like at the end of the sausage machine, if I can use that analogy, because they don't know why something has not happened or necessarily when it's going to slip. It's a really difficult position. Right, does anybody else have any other questions on this report? No? Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that, Gemma. So we'll move to the recommendations, and that is that the progress made on delivering the 22-23 capital programme within the remit of this committee be noted, and that the use of the delegated authority within the remit of this committee, as set out in this report, be noted, and that the use of emergency powers within the remit of this committee, as detailed in the attached Appendix 1 to the report, be noted, and that the changes to the 2022-2023 and future years capital programme within the remit of this committee, as set out in this report, be noted. So can we have a hand to move, please? Thank you very much, Councillor Goodjohn, and a seconder. Thank you very much, Councillor Hanks. Okay, so swiftly moving on now to agenda item 11. This is the Vale Public Services Board Draft Wellbeing Plan for 2023-2028. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed, Jen. Last report from me for the evening. This is bringing the draft PSB Wellbeing Plan to yourselves. Committee will remember that we brought this as part of the consultation process, as your committee is the designated scrutiny committee for the Public Services Board in the Vale of Glamorgan. So the report, very briefly, in terms of its overview, gives you the update in terms of the consultation exercise that was undertaken on the draft wellbeing plan, which the PSB is required to publish every 5 years, following a wellbeing assessment being undertaken, and that's also been reported to the committee. And the plan sets out a series of wellbeing objectives to be a more resilient and greener Vale, a more active and healthier Vale, and a more equitable and connected Vale. And it sets out 3 priority work streams around responding to the climate and nature emergencies, working with people who live in our communities that experience higher levels of deprivation, and becoming an age-friendly Vale. And it sets out 18 steps that are planned to holistically to deliver that work over the 5-year period. The statutory consultation was undertaken with a range of different stakeholders, including the public, business, the partners within the Public Services Board, and also importantly, Welsh Government and the Future Generations Commissioner's Office. The report itself highlights a range of different feedback and I think helpfully sets out what we've done in terms of changes to the plan as a result of that feedback. So that's described in the body of the report and also in detail in Appendix B. Appendix A then provides you with the latest iteration of the wellbeing plan itself. A series of changes have been made as a result of the consultation process in terms of sharpening up some of the actions, also reformatting and reordering those actions as well. You'll see as part of those steps that the PSB are proposing to take that many of them will hit multiple work streams and multiple objectives. And I think that demonstrates how the PSB partner organisations are considering that their work needs to be undertaken working together, but also working separately, but in following a same direction of travel over the period in order to achieve those wellbeing objectives. Much of the feedback has resulted in changes to the plan. Some of the feedback, however, hasn't resulted in changes to the plan, but the PSB at our meeting very recently talked about how we can reflect on them in the annual reports. And I think that's consistent with the feedback from your committee when you saw the report in the consultation process. So wanting to see some more specifics in terms of what's going to be delivered each year, and also developing a suite of measures and indicators. I want to provide some assurance to the committee that as part of the PSB's work, there are many established plans. For example, the Healthy Travel Charter, that has a series of metrics associated with it, as does the Move More Eat Well plan. So what our challenge is to look at establishing a series of indicators at both a population level, which will show the long-term impact of the work, but also some more tactical ones that can demonstrate progress being made each year. And the intention is that those would be included within the annual reports that your committee will see as part of that process. So on behalf of the PSB, I'm presenting the report to you this evening as their designated scrutiny committee. They've asked for your consideration post-consultation prior to the plan being finalised at the forthcoming PSB meeting. Following that PSB meeting, we would look to take the wellbeing plan through the executive arrangements of each of the partner organisations. And for the Vale of Glamorgan Council, as a partner of the PSB, that means that we'll take the report to Cabinet, and it will then also go on to full council on the 24th of April for council consideration and approval. So in addition, Chair, to asking for any comments on the plan to be relayed to the PSB this evening, we would also provide those comments to Cabinet when they consider this report from a council perspective as well. So that's a really brief overview of the report, but obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much for the feedback, Tom. I think one of the areas that was highlighted in the consultation, Barry Town Council mentioned it, and I think a few others did, was around the Welsh language and culture, vibrant culture, etc. I'm just wondering how that's going to be operationalised. It's something that wasn't really being considered before, but is now included within the new report. What's that going to look like? Thanks.
Absolutely, thank you, Councillor Johnson. And yes, a section has been added on Welsh language and culture. That was in direct response to the feedback, as you say, from Barry Town Council. Also, some comments from the Future Generations Commissioner's Office as well about how we can make sure that we weave through some of those kind of cultural and Welsh language considerations as part of the plan. What we've sought to do is look at how we can support those particular aspects of that well-being goal through some of the activities. So, for example, the age-friendly work, looking at ensuring that is offering cultural opportunities, but also specifically some opportunities through the medium of Welsh. So, for example, I met with the Chief Executive of Menter Bro Morgannwg this morning to look at how we can ensure that not only the activity that's being provided in partnership with Menter is targeting those particular cohorts. So, for example, looking at some of the well-being and cost of living advice that we were talking about earlier on this evening, but making sure that that's specifically positioned in terms of a medium of Welsh. We've also talked about the potential to look at supporting some of the net zero ambitions within the plan from a cultural perspective, so bringing people together in order to kind of celebrate and share some of the good practice that is underway, but also importantly making some links with the Welsh speaking community as well. So this morning I was talking about Golfark Row, for example, being a really good opportunity to include. Obviously, it has a massive cultural aspect to it, but also whether it can then look at being aligned with some of the other objectives within the plan. So there's some of the kind of tangible examples that I'd see as being part of the PSB's work. So looking very much at culture and Welsh language being an integral part of that kind of physical, mental well-being, as well as some of the specifics around age-friendly and the climate emergency.
Thank you. In terms of the consultation and the responses, Tom, were we pleased with the numbers that we had back, or was that quite a low response for this sort of consultation, just out of interest?
I think for this kind of consultation, it's probably as expected, but that's not to say that it's at a level that I'd be happy with in terms of going forward. However, what I would stress is that this was consultation on the final version of a quite technical plan. There's been a huge amount of engagement undertaken as part of developing the plan. So I mentioned the wellbeing assessment that we published in the summer. That is a technical statistical analysis, but involved going out and speaking with a huge range of different people across the Vale of Glamorgan over a long period of time. It was also really good to be able to have the opportunity to hear from the Youth Council as part of the consultation on the wellbeing plan, as well as then receiving that kind of more technical advice from Welsh Government and from the Future Generations Commissioner's Office. So I don't think I will ever sit at a scrutiny committee and say that the response rate was exactly what I wanted, because I will always want to hear more voices. But in terms of this point of the process, I'm assured that it's a sufficient range of voices that we've heard and have been able to reflect in the plan itself.
Good, thank you. I'm really pleased there's a bit in here about what we've achieved in the last period of the PSB, because that's helpful. Certainly something we asked for when we were talking about reflections. Anybody else got any questions? Sorry, go.
Sorry, Chair. Just to say that I raised the comments that committee made during the consultation about being really open to the idea of having some partners come and present on the work. They were really up for doing that. So we'll look to progress that as part of the annual reports and presentation to yourselves.
That'd be great. I like to see some of these comments, certainly to do with keeping well in old age, make leisure centres free. Great, great for APs. That would be wonderful, wouldn't it? Anyway, does anybody else have any questions on this one? No. Okay, that's fantastic. So let's move to the recommendations then, and that's that Scrutiny Committee considers the report, the updated draft wellbeing plan at Appendix A, the consultation feedback report at Appendix B, and the equality impact assessment at Appendix C, and that Scrutiny Committee refers any comments on the revised draft plan to the Director of Corporate Resources to be fed back to the Public Services Board, and that the committee's comments are reported to Cabinet when Cabinet consider the draft wellbeing plan in April, which is prior to consideration by full council on the 24th of April 2023. That's great. So can we move on that, please?
Just to check, Chair, in terms of committee, are we sending any comments back now, or just simply noting on the recommendations that have been raised?
Just noting. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks, committee.
So can we move on that one, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Drake. That's wonderful. Okay, so we're moving on now to agenda item 12, reports to the Director Corporate Resources. This is the third quarter scrutiny recommendations tracker and updated work programme schedule for 22-23. Mark, do you want to just take us through this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee. This is our regular report concerning progress on both scrutiny historic recommendations and to consider the updated forward work programme together with any slippage for 22-23. We have a number of appendices attached. Appendices A through to C are regarding the historic recommendations that the committee have previously made. On the whole, most recommendations have been completed now. We do have a few exceptions, but they're very small. For example, in Appendix A, concerning the service plans and targets setting to deliver the annual delivery plan for 22-23. Part of that recommendation concerned the C-user sessions to inform the development of the corporate performance framework that would be undertaken. Today we had one of those sessions presented by Tom. So that is currently still ongoing. Just to check with yourself, Tom, are we planning any further sessions now, or is that something that could be considered completed if committee were happy? Don't know if Tom is still on.
I think it might be. I know we did a. Sorry, has he gone?
No, sorry, Chair, go on.
I was going to say I know we recorded it this afternoon, but it might be an opportunity to do another session in a couple of months' time, especially for those that couldn't make it.
We can
ask Tom that, can't we? I think so.
Of course.
Sorry, Councillor Goodjohn, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Tom has decided to leave us from escape our questioning.
He thought it was all over.
No, it's no problem. I can bring that back again, Chair.
It's fine.
We'll leave it as ongoing for the moment.
Yeah,
of course.
I think that would be okay.
In terms of Appendix B, all the sort of outstanding actions on there have been completed. Regarding Appendix C, we've got two items still showing as ongoing. One is around the sickness absence report, but that is in hand. HR are going to take on board the recommendations that were previously made around that, so that those aspects should be included in future reporting. Also, as Tom alluded to in the previous report about PSB, future representative, future reports come in via representatives coming to future scrutiny committee meetings. So that is also in hand. Moving on to Appendix D, that's the updated forward work programme schedule for 22-23. This provides the most recent snapshot of the committee's work programme as aligned with the quarterly cabinet forward work programme, which includes details around slippages, etc., if appropriate. It also should be noted that that schedule is a proposed list of items for consideration, and may be subject to change depending on prevailing circumstances. So it's a bit of a movable feast. And as committee make further suggestions, we do include those in as well. In terms of this report, committee are asked, firstly, that the status of the actions listed in appendices A through to C of the report be agreed, and that the updated forward work programme schedule, as attached in Appendix D, be approved and uploaded to the Council's website. That's everything from me, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you. Now, Councillor John, you've still got your hand up. Did we cut you off halfway? I'm sorry.
No, that's quite all right. I wanted to wait for the report to be finished before questioning. Just a few questions on the other reports and annual reports that we haven't got yet. Obviously, things like the gender pay gap, which is considered in the workforce planning review, and the digital strategy that is ongoing, just to check that those will be taken off this list once they are reported to us.
Yeah, they'll be chased up, Vice Chair, and once completed, we can remove them from there, or we put an update to say that they've been completed and provide the details of when they've been presented to the committee, for example.
Great. So just a question then. So obviously we have the Oracle, as has been previously mentioned, the Oracle report that we wanted, and the Leisure Services budget report that we wanted. I presume that's going to be next municipal year now. And also we are waiting on the welfare reform report that I'm specifically quite interested in, just checking that we have space for next year for those to go into, because I'm interested to see if there's provisions for us to have an extra meeting if necessary. I'm just aware that the agendas are getting very heavy, and that next year we have additional reports that we want. So just asking if there's provision to have additional meetings if need be. We don't want every meeting to be going till past 9 o'clock.
So, and that's a good point, Vice Chair. Yeah, there are provisions for that. You can either have a sort of extraordinary meeting where we can consider a number of additional items, or have a special meeting of the committee which focus on a specific item or report. So there are options available, subject to the agreement of the chair and the committee to hold those. But those can be done. On the ones that you have referred to, I will chase those up again as well to see where we're at with those reports.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we did have that discussion a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? Because I want us to have enough time to properly scrutinise all of our reports. And yes, we have had the last couple of very heavy agendas. I think April is looking to be quite busy as well, isn't it? So I'd like, if committee would like to have an extraordinary meeting to spare us being here till after 9, but I think we need to have that discussion when we know what might be included in the next agenda. Because I appreciate everybody's time is precious. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Chair. And it's the same issue fundamentally, which is the as we discussed this at Democratic Services Committee, as you'll know, Chair, about the the length of meetings. What's the appropriate length of meetings? We had a meeting last time which lasted till around 10 o'clock. We had 10 substantive items on this agenda, and it's taken us well past 9. So there were 2 points I wanted to raise. One was that I do feel that if the committee requests a report, then there should be a prioritisation of that, because a lot of the work that we're doing is rubber stamping and double checking things that have already been to cabinet or will go to cabinet, or whether or not the decision maker. But where it is that we've identified a query that we'd like resolved, and by means of a report, then that should really be prioritised as much as possible within the Democratic Services work stream. I don't think it makes sense that we ask for a report on the budget implications of something in October, and yet we are unlikely to get that. Well, we're not getting that within the current financial year. That sort of thing, should be resolved quicker. And if there's a reason for that, which is related to capacity issues within democratic services, then they should be reporting that in other ways. If there's a reason why something isn't being done within a period of time, then it should be made known as to why that is. Obviously, Chair, it's up to you as to weigh up, and in this case, probably literally weigh the amount of stuff that's being brought forward for an agenda conference. But I look at this list that's in front of us of things for the April meeting, and I sit there and go, okay, what's really got to be done in the April meeting? What needs to be seen, and what actually can be slipped and discussed as to either does this go on a separate agenda later on, or as a separate meeting, sort of more worthwhile. And the point that comes alongside this is that since we moved, to being digital rather than have paper copies. I know the chair obviously has a paper copy, so presumably, Chair, you can see exactly the weight of paperwork that we're being expected to read through in order to sit and respond and question things. And I'm fairly sure that over the last couple of years, the amount of paperwork being provided to us has expanded quite substantially. And so instead of there being a series of smaller reports, we're now being given all of the information all of the time, and things are hidden in plain sight, and you're trying to wade through hundreds of pages of reports every month, and give them the proper scrutiny that it deserves. So I think there's a question. I don't know whether this is something that is occurring across all 5 of the scrutiny committees, and whether it's a matter therefore for the chairs and vice chairs committee to consider. But I think there's also just a wider question about how we prioritise what scrutiny committee should be doing. And I want to avoid, if possible, what feels like sometimes a well-meaning default response from Cabinet to refer things for scrutiny here, or refer to scrutiny in 5 committees, and that then eats into the amount of time that's maybe doing other things that could be more productive. I'm sure most of the committee here would welcome, sort of a wider conversation, but not at 9:20 at night. Thanks,
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. And I absolutely agree, and want you to know that there were going to be a few other items on this agenda when we had our agenda conference. It is important, and we do need some sort of resolution so that we can have more focused debate, and that we can have slightly shorter meetings, because I just think we can't concentrate for more than 3 hours. It's a lot, isn't it? Anyway, Councillor Haynes, please.
Yes, I just want to agree with Councillor Johnson on the things about the size of the reports. Now, I pride myself on trying to read these reports and then trying to follow the links to the other reports. And this is a part-time role. Let's be honest, it's a part-time role, but I timed myself for this meeting, and I don't think I've done due diligence in reality, but I took 9 hours to go through the reports for this meeting. And I think I just would like to support Councillor Johnson on his comments about the size of the reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. So I think when we have our next agenda conference meeting, we'll have a good look at what's on there, and if we can have it as soon as, rather than the week before, then we can then look to see if we can take some of these things out of it, prioritise the stuff we've asked for. That would be great.
Yeah, I'll
okay.
take those comments back, Chair, to
Thank
Democratic
you.
Services, to Principal Democratic Services Officer and Operational Manager as well.
And I think this is definitely an agenda item for the next Chair and Vice Chairs Committee. I don't know whether, because we're an overarching committee, we may end up seeing more reports than the others who are very focused on their particular area. I don't know, but we need to have that debate, don't we? I think.
Yeah, what I would say as well, Chair, we've had a number of statutory reports over the last few months with a financial bent as well, in light of the budget and other things going on. So it has put a lot more onus on those things, as opposed to perhaps other reports that we should be getting through. But as I said, I will chase up those other reports that have been raised, and I will take these comments back as about the volume and you know, the opportunities for proper scrutiny back to democratic services as well.
And that's really our main point, I think, from committee. We want to do this job justice. We want to do due diligence with our scrutiny. That's fantastic. Thank you. So if we can move to the recommendations, it's been a long night. That the status of the actions listed in appendices A to C in our report be agreed, and that the updated forward work programme schedule for 22-23, which was attached to Appendix D, be approved and uploaded to the Council's website. So can I have a hand, please, to move on that one? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and the seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hanks. So that brings me to agenda item 13, which is any items which the chair has decided are urgent, part 1, and you'll be so relieved to know there aren't any. Part 2, which is the bit where we would, if we needed to exclude press and public. Agenda item 14, which is any items which the chair has decided are urgent. And again, you'll be very relieved to know there aren't any. So that just remains for me to let you all know that the next meeting, because of Easter, will be Wednesday, the 26th of April. And I want to thank you all for your participation and to wish you all a pleasant left of what is left of the evening. So good night and thank you all.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night.
Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you all.
Good night,
Chair. Good night,